We'd like to welcome you to our Planning Commission meeting this evening. It's really nice to have so many of our residents here with us tonight. This is Planning Commission meeting for May 23rd, 2023. This meeting is being recorded, and we're going to begin with an opening prayer by Commissioner Showers, and then we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance by Commissioner Danielson.
Our dear Father in heaven, we're grateful to be in this meeting tonight. We ask for thy guidance and thy spirit, that we can be respectful, that we can all participate in this process to achieve the results and the solutions that we need that are best for our community. We're grateful for our wonderful city, for the staff who work so hard. We're grateful for the wonderful residents who are kind and caring, and we pray that that would bless our community with safety and with peace. We ask for these things in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll begin our meeting this evening with a roll call of the commissioners. Sharon Call, here. Mike Marchbanks.
Here.
Jared Showers.
Here.
Rob Callis.
Here.
Stephen Johnson.
Here.
Scott Thompson.
Here.
And Karen Danielson.
Here.
Okay. Our next item on our agenda, this is a time for approval of the minutes from May 9th, 2023. And commissioners have received those minutes ahead of time, had a chance to review those. Are there any corrections or additions to those minutes? I didn't see anything, but did any of you? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. Second.
Okay, motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the voting is unanimous. Okay, item number 3 on our agenda. This is a time for public comment. This would be for any items not already on the agenda for this evening. Is there anyone here for that purpose? Okay. The next item on our agenda is item number 4. This is a plat amendment for Ken's Cove, Plat B. This is at 387 North and 367 North, 540 West. And our applicant is Kay Heaton. Is she here this evening? Okay, if you'd like to come up to the front, that would be great. We may ask you questions.
Hope I got your answers.
Okay, you can take a seat, that's fine. And is there a place for you to sign in there or not? Okay. Okay, and our presenting staff is Michael Florence.
Okay,
And we'll go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, commissioners. It's great to be here with you this evening. So Mrs. Heaton owns the 2 lots here located on 387 North and 367 North, 540 West. Her purpose in coming before you this evening is for a subdivision plat amendment. She owns these 2 lots highlighted in red, and she would like to consolidate both those lots into one lot. She wants a larger lot, and her intention is to build a new single-family home on the one combined lot. So it's a pretty simple request. The Planning Commission has reviewed these in the past, and so city staff has recommended. We've been reviewing her subdivision plat, but we propose the condition that the applicant will continue to work with city staff to make all technical corrections as necessary to the plat prior to recording. Prior to plat recording, the applicant will update the final plat Mylar to include notarized signatures of the owner's consent to dedication and obtain signatures of all entities indicated on the subdivision plat attached here too, and all items of the staff report. Both our city ordinance and state law allows for the combination of two lots, to combine those as a plat amendment. And so, myself or Mrs. Heaton would be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Does anyone have questions?
One question, we ascertained that there's no utilities running down the lot line to where anything would need to be moved as far as the easement that exists currently? Nothing's in that easement, is there?
I don't know, the easements are set up, on the subdivision plat here along the front and along Gilman Lane. We
There's
don't
not-
have,
There's not one down the center line there, typical
Yeah.
public utility easement?
yeah, and
As long as nothing's in it, it's pretty,
yeah, there
pretty
shouldn't be
simple.
anything in it yet because nothing's been built, so, that easement would be removed.
yep.
And so, as far as I know, there's not any easements, or not any utilities in there.
I think that's the only thing you'd wanna make sure, just so you don't get into expense that you weren't anticipating. But I doubt
I'm
there.
getting into them already.
Yeah, well, yeah, you're gonna get into plenty, but that's one you don't wanna deal with the utility companies on.
I was talking to one of the neighbors, and he asked me the question, do you have to combine the two? To build on it?
Well,
not if
not
they're
if you
both-
stayed within the bounds of one or the other, you wouldn't need to conjoin them. And in that case, down the road, you could build on the other lot, but if you're planning on plopping your home
In the middle?
in the middle, then yeah, you
Okay.
need to do what you're doing.
Or to meet any setback requirements or,
Yeah. I have a couple of comments.
Go
I'd
ahead.
like to move the mailboxes, because they're right in the middle. And the post office said they didn't have anything to do with that, that came from the city because you give them their easement. Do you have any objections if the people in that cul-de-sac have no objections for me having it moved to the corner rather than in the middle of the lot?
Gosh, I don't know that we make those decisions,
Is it
do we?
one box for the whole subdivision?
I would
Except there are
imagine.
2 extra black boxes, and I think it's because some of the homes have apartments and there aren't enough boxes for everybody. But I don't know who owns the black mailboxes. And I'd like to ask the post office if they give us a bigger box in that regard, if that's possible.
Developer has to put that in, doesn't he?
Well, it's already in. That's the
So-
point. It's already in.
That's what I mean,
Yeah.
is that.
it can be
that's what it
moved. We can identify a new postal easement, somewhere here on the property.
Okay.
Then you would just need to work with the post office if that size works, the current size works, or you need to put in a bigger one.
Well, I don't
So-
know who the black ones belong to.
Yeah, I don't either. You'll have to work that out with
You'll have to figure that-
neighborhood.
We've never really had anything to do with postal easements or placements or anything.
Well, the post office said they haven't either, so we're in the
No, they
same boat.
require there be a place, but it can be anywhere that, you know.
Well, the planning director seems to be aware of it, so just,
Okay,
he would be your source for more information.
all right.
Any
If it
other,
was up to me, I wouldn't have one. Everybody have their own mailbox like in the old days, but anyway. The post office doesn't let us do that either, so.
No, this way they just open up the back and stuff them full and leave.
do you have any other questions of the commission? This isn't a public hearing, but if there are public that may have a question, that we would certainly listen to that. Anyone? Okay. Any other concerns?
We have one.
Oh, okay.
be figured out tonight, so it doesn't have to be continued to an additional meeting. I'm sorry, I'm her daughter, that's why I'm asking.
It wouldn't need to come
This
to
isn't
us.
something that we would need to decide, and she can just work with our planning director on it.
Yeah,
Because you just mentioned earlier that you'd need to figure out a new location, easement location, so I just thought if that could be ironed out tonight, it might save money.
the planning department can do that, yeah.
Yeah, it's not something that we make decisions on as a commission. Okay?
Sounds good.
Okay. are we ready for a motion, or are there any other comments or questions?
Looks pretty straightforward. Everything seems to be in compliance, so.
Okay, would you like to go ahead with the motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion.
Okay,
I motion to approve the applicant's request for a plat amendment, approval of Ken's Cove Plat B subdivision with the following conditions. 1, the applicant will continue to work with city staff to make all technical corrections as necessary to the plat prior to recording. Prior to plat recording, the applicant will update the final plat Mylar to include notarized signatures of owner's consent to dedication and obtain signatures of all entities indicated on the subdivision plat attached hereto in the staff report and all additional items of the staff report.
I second that motion.
okay, I have a motion, do I have a second?
He
Oh, that's
was the second.
Oh, yeah, okay, motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the voting is unanimous.
So it's good to go?
Mm-hmm,
Yep,
you're,
work with Mike.
you're good as far as we're concerned.
Okay.
Whew, that was easy.
Probably the easiest one.
We have a hand out there in the audience. for
Okay,
somebody.
sir?
Does this have any effect, by changing it from 2 lots to 1, does this have any effect on the property taxes?
It becomes one parcel, so the county will tax it as one parcel instead of 2.
Any change of a lot will probably trigger a reassessment of that, but that's the county assessor's office, nothing to do with us.
You wouldn't know if it would go up or down?
Likely go down.
If it's a larger lot, it'll likely go down?
They generally are
Yeah.
gonna assess that as 2 lots are gonna be more in total than 1 combined lot.
Okay. Okay,
But it's, yeah, it is what it is there.
But she'll probably build a very nice home on there, and it'll be taxed a heck of a lot more than 2 vacant lots, so. If you're concerned about the loss in revenue, I think it'll be more than made up for.
okay, sir, can you give your name, sir?
My name's Dean Terry.
Okay,
I have 2 houses, me and the wife in Lindon. They're right next to each other. Would my property taxes go down if I combine them into 1 lot?
gosh, we don't deal at all with property taxes, so I don't know if our planning director can give any insight on that, because we don't, we
If
just
you've
don't
got
work
2
with
houses,
taxation.
you couldn't combine them into 1 lot. You'd have to have them, they have to be on separate lots.
The only
We're
way,
on separate lots right now.
Combine the 2 lots into 1 and have 2 houses on 1 lot.
could they designate one as a casita or a secondary?
Yes, if it met all the setbacks,
you'd
I mean,
get
it
all
has to be
that,
40% of the size of the single-family home. There'd be a lot to look
If
into.
you could deem one of them an accessory home, and just, cause you can only have 1 primary home on a Lindon lot, unless you're in a duplex then. You're not.
Okay. Well, I'll let you work that out with, or we'll let you work that out with whoever handles taxes and assessments. Okay, the next item on our agenda, it is, because it does have involve an ordinance amendment, we will need to open a public hearing.
I move to open a public hearing.
Second.
Okay. Motion to open a public hearing and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the voting is unanimous. And our applicant this evening is Allen College. If you want to come up. Okay. Hi. And this is your son Tanner
This is Tanner.
College, okay. Okay, and this is a big item on our agenda, and it does involve several different motions, but we'll work with that as we work through it. And our presenting staff this evening is Michael Florence.
Great, thank you.
And And if the two of you have comments, if you could speak into the microphones, because we do have a lot of people that listen online. Okay.
And Commissioners, I hopefully you saw the amended agenda I sent out yesterday. Just, originally I had all 5 applications into one agenda item. When it gets down to it with, when you start making motions and things, that, you know, that's why I sent out a new one, so it separates each agenda item. But that's all that did. So, we've been working with Mr. College for a while now to not only look at some improvements that he wants to make to his property, but also to look at our general plan and how the property would conform to our general plan, but also to address a notice on some code issues that we're working out as well to bring into compliance on the property. I've put a presentation together, so hopefully it breaks things out a little bit better than the staff report. There's a lot of information in that staff report. So there's 5 applications that are being presented. The first one is on behalf of the city. As we looked at the properties, so there's currently 3 short-term rentals on the property, and the commercial farm zone doesn't allow short-term rentals, but it does allow bed and breakfast uses, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But so we felt like as a city it was important for us to define what bed and breakfast meant, and so that's the first application, is to define under an ordinance amendment what bed and breakfast use is. And then also, we looked at the commercial farm zone and have put together some standards for your consideration as part of that as well. The second application is a conditional use permit for the bed and breakfast uses. The third is the amended site plan and conditional use permit approval to convert a previously approved agriculture accessory building. Those are approved by staff, so you didn't see this building. But to convert that into a commercial use building. The fourth one, there's a structure on the site that's known as the Red Barn. Mr. College proposes to use that as a retail building, and I'll let him explain more about that as well in our presentation. And then, so that would need an amended site plan and conditional use permit approval, and then to rezone 2 parcels of property from R120 to commercial farm. So I don't know how many of you have been there to Wadley Farms, but I provided this in your staff report to kind of show the different buildings, and hopefully I got those correct on there. If I didn't, Alan, please correct me on that. But that just shows where the different buildings are located, because we'll go through some of those this evening. Just some considerations that I outlined in your staff report is we look at commercial uses not only for this site, but also for Walker Farms. Are we meeting the intent and the purpose of the commercial farm zone? That, I wanted to pull that up real quick. So the purpose of the commercial farm zones are to establish to provide encouragement of agricultural production and associated commercial activities that are compatible with and or promote agricultural uses within the city. Objectives of the zone are included promoting and preserving agricultural production, promoting agricultural open space throughout the city, and allowing associated commercial activities which would be used as additional revenue sources to help sustain and support agricultural industry within Lindon. Although the intent of the zone is to promote agricultural uses within the city, the zone may be utilized as a holding zone to allow reasonable options for income from agricultural and or commercial uses for a period of time before developing the land in conformance with the general plan and land use map. And so with those considerations, go back. So that was the purpose. We also need to consider the Lindon City Street Master Plan map. We'll get into talking more about Main Street as we progress. Number 3, ensuring that each proposed use meets the requirements of the commercial farm zone. The installation of public improvements that are required for all commercial zones, and then the number of existing dwellings on the property and how this relates to the proposal for bed and breakfast. I want to go back to this one, just kind of some history. Long before I got here, but some of you were probably involved with this, but the city and Mr. College have been working on proposals and development of the Wadley Farms property since at least 2000, if probably not before. But in 2000, the city approved an ordinance amendment to allow reception centers and events to have an admission charge. I think events have been being held there and, kind of wanted to take it to the next level. 2001, there was a conditional use permit granted by the Planning Commission for a reception center in the R120 zone. Jump ahead a decade, in 2011, the city and Mr. College created the commercial farm zone and the zoning ordinance. And then the castle was approved as a conditional use permit. Since that time, 2017, there was amended site plan approval for an addition to the castle building. And then 2022, the Planning Commission and City Council approved a zone change where Mr. College's current home is, or new home is, to change that, rezone it to commercial farm. And so just kind of some highlights there. Let's see. So our first application, this is the one the city made, was to define what bed and breakfast means. But the commercial farm zone lays out the number of permitted dwellings in the zone. There's 3 permitted dwellings that it allows. It allows a single family dwelling that's owner occupied, an accessory dwelling unit apartment, and a caretaker or farm help dwelling. As a conditional use, the commercial farm zone allows a bed and breakfast facility. Currently on the site, the owner has 2 single-family homes, an accessory dwelling unit above or future accessory dwelling unit above the garage for the new single-family home, and 3 short-term rentals. And so some of the proposals would be for the bed and breakfast ordinance amendment would be to create 2 separate definitions for bed and breakfast use. So we created one definition called a bed and breakfast dwelling. This would be a facility that applies generally within Lindon City. So if someone wanted to do one in the commercial zone, for example, this is what the definition they would fall under. That's 3 rooms or less, rented out by the day, maximum occupancy of 10 individuals, that offers breakfast, your typical bed and breakfast use. The second definition we came up with was bed and breakfast farm retreat dwelling. So this would be particular to the 2 commercial farm zones we have. And so it allows up to 4 guest rooms rented out by day, and it allows for lodging accommodations. The owner has to live on site as their primary residence, and it provides guests with a centrally incorporated dining area. So the difference is it provides guest rooms, and where they can be in different buildings on the site compared to the bed and breakfast dwelling where they have to be within one facility. And so any questions on that, on those 2 definitions? Okay. The other change we need to make is, or that we're proposing to make, is in our standard land use table. It calls out bed and breakfast in 2 separate categories. It calls out bed and breakfast as hotels, tourist courts, bed and breakfast, and motels. You can see which zones they are permitted in. We don't have the commercial farm zone in our standard land use table. Those permitted uses are found within that zone itself. And so that's why you don't see a CF up here for commercial farm. And then we have residential bed and breakfast facility, 3 rooms or less, that are just prohibited everywhere. And so those kind of conflict. One says you can have them in certain zones, the other one says you can't have them anywhere. And so the proposal is to strike out the residential bed and breakfast for 3 rooms or less. Commissioner College, you look like you're gonna ask a question. No? Okay. Continuing on with the ordinance amendment, it allows 1 guest room per 4 acres. And so currently, Mr. College, you'll see in the next application is asking for 3. That would change those 3 short-term rentals to the 3 bed and breakfast units. In the future, he would like to look at the farmhouse building and convert that to a bed and breakfast as well, but that currently isn't part of this application, but this would allow him to come back as a conditional use when he's ready to do that. Guest rooms may be located in one facility or separate units in the commercial farm zone. They have to meet the same setbacks and frontages that's called out in the commercial farm zone, meet sanitation requirements as in Utah administrative rules, meet the building and fire codes. So what the ordinance would also cap the number of dwellings at 7. And so currently there's 6 on site and it would cap it at 7. So if he wanted to come back to amend his conditional use permit for the farmhouse as a conditional use, he could. This would allow Walker Farms to have 1 bed and breakfast facility. You can see the different permitted, too fast on
Going
that.
back to that 7th one, could that, so, does this prohibit him from going back and doing another building? And doing a 7th in another building? Or does it tie it to to the existing farmhouse?
It wouldn't be tied just to that farmhouse. He could do it in another building as long as he got approval, conditional use permit approval.
But he wouldn't be able to convert the farmhouse to a bed and breakfast if
It would-
it was in a separate building,
That's correct.
because it's limited to 7.
So I noted there the different permitted and conditional uses in the zone, so you can see those. So any questions about the ordinance amendment? That's our first application. Okay.
The only question I had was, if the farmhouse becomes a bed and breakfast, then I guess because the colleges would be living in the home, that would count as the owner occupied. But if I understand you're going to be leaving for a period of time, and so if they're gone, then it seems like the farmhouse would have to be occupied by one of the owners.
Yes.
Okay, they couldn't both be gone. I mean, you couldn't have that as a bed and breakfast and
Yeah.
you also be gone out of the home. Is that true?
Yes, one of the owners would need to still live there.
Okay.
Yeah, Alan, you can.
Yes, so the owners are also our children,
Right.
and so one of the children would be there, and then our new
Okay.
home is also incorporated within the farm.
Right.
So
Right.
we'd always have owner occupied. We're very sensitive for that.
Okay. Okay.
So, Mike, I think you put it up there, but one of the things I'm always concerned about is when we have an ordinance for specific properties and how is that can be used elsewhere, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think you were trying to say that at Walker Farms, the acreage would allow them to have 1, is that?
Yeah, I think they're just right around 6 acres. And so they'd be, I think they're 6.5 acres, so they'd be allowed to have 1.
One for every 4 acres, right?
Now, if they continued to buy property, I think the plan is to eventually own the whole block, but, I don't know if they can get that or not. That would then in theory, allow them to have more
That's correct.
with those other properties on there.
But also, what's the limitation on, to remain a commercial farm zone, they would have to, if they continued to expand property, then the percentage of the property would still have to remain agricultural. So I don't know if you're
Right.
close to that, or if you'd have to raise your agricultural,
Yeah.
if that were to occur.
Yeah, that was just, I'm just trying to think,
Yeah,
you know, I don't know if we didn't think we had very many other places, but, you know, if someone wanted to buy up a block somewhere else, in theory, there could be a third somewhere in the city, a commercial farm zone,
Actually, the home on 400, the really large home on 400, I hear is for sale as well.
you know,
That's-
so, I guess I just always trying to think through all the ramifications of doing an ordinance for a specific property versus solving,
that's correct.
you know, so.
Well, I don't think
That's-
this doesn't just apply to this property.
Well, it's been written to apply for this property,
But
though,
you
with
think
those
you gotta
things
look
in-
in, you know, like for the 7 dwellings, basically, you know, that it would allow up to a maximum, so you have to figure out how does that apply? Walker Farms right now just has the one single-family home, and they could have an accessory apartment as well, that they could also come petition for a bed and breakfast
Right.
unit as well.
I guess what I'm saying is the reason that the number 7 here is because it meets this property. I mean, we didn't come and argue or debate what would be a appropriate number of dwellings. So that's why
correct.
I'm concerned that we look at that, right? Because it's based upon a current situation versus starting from scratch and saying what would be best, you know, for the city in this. So that's, I was always want to look at it especially careful as we do that, trying to fit a current situation.
That's
I
correct.
know, Mike, this afternoon you sent out some letters from residents that were concerned that on the different issue, which is the combining of the 2 other additional property, that somehow in the future, those would be converted and those would somehow become a bed and breakfast as well. So is there can maybe Alan, talk to that? There was concern that the 2 additional properties that we're gonna be combining here tonight, adding to it, there's concern that you will go in and build additional structures on those properties, which will then eventually, someone may want it to be a bed and breakfast. What can you highlight what your plans are?
So that'll be further down the road about the annexing of these 2 properties that we've acquired. The one property is contiguous with the castle, and our plans are, I've ordered the vines, we're putting that into a vineyard. They come next week, and so that's about 1/3 of an acre that will be contiguous with the castle to give us that vineyard ambience.
Okay.
There'll be no structures there. You can farm land for 2 years and then have it reassigned into greenbelt. And so we have enough greenbelt land that's our plan, is to have the county put that back into greenbelt, that piece. The second piece is, there's not gonna be a bed and breakfast there. We're planning on, probably cleaning it up. It's kind of been a storage area and making it more for our shop, a shop there.
Okay.
I think that was part of the concern, though, is that the shop eventually being a bed and breakfast, is that right?
No, the shop won't be a bed and breakfast.
Okay.
Yeah, we're the best predictor of future performance is past performance, and as you can see, we're very sensitive to the aesthetics of the farm, and that won't be a bed and breakfast.
This is a public hearing. If there's additional questions for Mr. College or staff on this particular item, we can go ahead with that, and then we will allow public to make comments also.
So just for the public, let's finish the whole presentation and
Do
then.
you want to finish the whole presentation first, and then we will open it for public comment?
If that's okay.
Does that work? And where this is what, the one that is the actual,
This is actually a public hearing,
yeah,
but
okay, all right. Let's go ahead and do the other items on the agenda, and then we'll open it for public comment, if that's okay. And then we'll allow whoever members here to ask questions or make comment. Okay? Go ahead.
Okay, so the second agenda item is if, it would be now applying the conditional use permit, or sorry, applying the bed and breakfast use to be able to do the conditional use permit for the bed and breakfast uses. And so there's currently three, like I said, three short-term rentals that would be converted into the bed and breakfast use under the commercial farm zone. So this top building here, there's 2 units in there. That was originally approved as a farm or caretaker residence. It was subdivided at some point into 2 units and, or divided, I shouldn't say subdivided, but divided into 2 units. And so it's got 2 short-term rentals there, and then above the office here, there's 1 additional bed and breakfast unit, or sorry, short-term rental unit that would be a bed and breakfast, converted to bed and breakfast. And so staff has recommended the following conditions of approval. The proposed bed and breakfast retreat is approved for 3 bed and breakfast units. Any outstanding building code requirements or changes of use from a caretaker unit to a bed and breakfast units will be addressed with the Lindon City building official and building permits obtained. All transient room taxes will be paid to the state of Utah for the bed and breakfast use and all items of the staff report. I just realized one item that I need to back up on as well for the Planning Commission and for the public is that the City Council has decided to be the final land use authority on these items, and so this evening you are the recommending body for each application, and so these will go on to City Council for final review. So, any questions about the conditional use permit?
The one I thought and maybe it doesn't need to be in the conditional use permit because it's in the definition, but don't they need like a centralized eating place? Is that what the ordinance says?
Mm-hmm. So,
Okay.
yeah, so Mr. College will need to designate that in a building.
So I don't know if that needed to be in the motion or not, or do you think that's clear?
I thought it was clear in the ordinance,
Okay.
but if you feel like we need to have it as a condition as well.
Just to make sure, okay, thank you on that.
What would your condition be then?
Well, that as part of the process, they designate where that is, but
And that could be a condition that it's designated.
that it's designated where that,
Nation of a central eating place?
the central eating place.
All right, any other questions?
The only other question I have, and I'm sure staff's asked you this, is that when you were putting in bed and breakfast units or these extra units and changing the use, I just wondered why that wasn't brought to us at that time, where the use was changed, instead of us having to backtrack. I don't know.
I guess this kind of comes back to the history. As you know, our primary goal is to preserve the farm, open space, and agricultural production. And we have a presentation that elaborates on how we've done that effectively. But in order to do that, as you know, that you have to augment the income for your farm.
Yeah.
And that's why Anderson Farm is now a subdivision, and that's why Bella Vista now is closing, and that the property becomes more valuable for other purposes than what it is that they've designated it for. And so this has been more organic. It's we started with the bed and breakfast in the 1 unit, and it became very popular as there was more people coming for a destination. And so we converted, I'm going to backtrack just a bit. I built the shop, my first shop, where the castle is. And we decided to build a castle over the shop. And then I wanted to move the shop further away from the castle, but as it became more popular, where that shop was is what it is I turned into what we call the chateau. And then there came a need for more bed and breakfast facilities for people who came for destinations. And so we built that out and finished it, inspected it, and somehow missed that it needed to come to the commission, that it needed to be changed. It was just organic. And so that was one of the things that has been brought now to the attention.
Yeah, that was just one of my questions is, these changes that we're having to address now, why they weren't brought to us at the time you were about to make those changes.
And just to comment on that, so like you
Okay.
said, this was a bit organic, so this happened when the first unit was put in, kind of 2019, that was an existing apartment that had long-term renters. And we
Okay,
saw this need of people asking where to stay, and that was around the time that Airbnb was coming around. And so there was no regulation at that point for the city on Airbnb units or things like that. So we had listed it on that site, on a short-term rental site. And it wasn't until later that we've been told it's out of compliance. So now we're trying to work on how do we make these compliant, and that falls directly within the commercial farm zone of that use of a bed and breakfast space, which is what we've already kind of been doing, but we want to be compliant and see how we can make that work.
okay. Yeah, I understand the reasons, it would have been easier to have had it brought to us at first, is all.
Sharon, if I would have known in 2011, when we did the commercial farm zone, what I know now, I would have bought Tesla. I would have bought Qualtrics. I wouldn't be here. I don't know
you've
the
learned a lot
future.
in
Well,
the time
we don't
you've
know
been
the
doing
future.
it.
It's, as our attorney friends say, it's a process of discovery, and
Right.
it's a design build, and with that comes lots of errors, but it's also been lots of successes, and I appreciate your willingness to work with us and tolerance.
Well, it's a
for doing it.
beautiful, what you've done is beautiful. I don't have any hesitations on that at all. It's a terrific addition to the city. Those were my concerns, having to backtrack to make these changes.
Well, and we're learning, this isn't Colliard or Daw construction. This is, as Tanner pointed out, organic. And if you can tell us where the 13 years in the future will be, I need to hear.
No, I can't.
We just know that it's important to preserve some agrarian culture within the city.
I agree. I agree. Okay, well, go ahead, Mike, go ahead.
Okay. The next application is amended site plan and conditional use permit for a new commercial building. So, as Mr. College stated, the shop has moved around a lot, and this building was approved as an agricultural accessory building. So this was a building that could be approved by staff as a shop or maintenance facility. That's the way we approved it in 2020. Partway through the construction, Mr. College approached city staff about converting that to a commercial building that could be used for dinner parties, other events, some of those conditional uses that are approved in that zone, such as grape juice production or a boutique, something like that on the ground level. And so we asked Mr. College to apply for an amended site plan approval and conditional use. And so this building, you can see the requirements here. It's got to meet the setback requirements, which it does. It meets the 50 and 20 foot and 10 setback requirements, distance between buildings, the height requirements. The ordinance allows you to go to a height of 35 feet. There is a site obstructing fence to the east of the building that separates this building from the property to the east. It does meet the parking requirements and is accessed from 400 North. And so the staff has recommended the following conditions: that due to the change of use of the building from an agricultural accessory building to a commercial building, any outstanding building code, permit, or engineering requirements will be addressed and approved by the Lindon City Building Official. The occupancy of the building will be provided by the applicant's architect, and clearly posted. Any food processing, all health department regulations will be followed, and any food processing permits be obtained work with the Lindon City Engineering to determine if a grease trap will need to be installed, and all items of the staff report. One of the concerns we received from the residents adjacent to this property was looking down into their backyard. And so that's something you'll want to consider as well as you review this. Any questions on this application?
So the conditional use is just to be used as a commercial building
Yes, with those.
with those four
Conditions.
options?
Yes.
Okay.
What commercial application? Alan, can you explain maybe what commercial applications you have,
Yes,
you
I-
have in mind for that building?
And as Mrs. Call pointed out, if we would have known then when we started, what we know now, things would have been different. But where we turned the chateau, the shop into the chateau, I had no shop. And so I made that as a shop, but aesthetically it had to fit on campus. Two things happened in the interim. Number one is that they announced, the first thing was that my neighbors that are contiguous with me asked me to purchase some of their land to help them. And so I purchased this parcel of which we're going to discuss that then would be part of the farm. And that let me then be able to move the shop off of campus. So I didn't have to have my shop on campus. As you study Disney and destinations, you never see the hard workings of the whereabouts within the campus itself. The second happened was the announcement of the temple, and as you know, the church asked for our property, and we just about was rescued, and we wouldn't be here, but he selected another site. So with that, and as we recruited physicians, we found it very difficult to find a venue where we could have intimacy in talking with the physicians in Utah County. We go to La Jolla, maybe go to Sundance, maybe go to Thanksgiving Point, but even there it was cluttery. And so when our castle wasn't occupied, we would actually do our physician recruitment with their family there, which facilitated that kind of intimacy that you'd like to have and privacy. And I thought with now the temple being announced that there's a need for wedding breakfasts or more these intimate sort of gatherings within Lindon that could suffice. And so for that reason, we've made the petition to use this building that aesthetically looks good on campus as another venue for meetings.
Like corporate retreats?
Corporate retreats.
Things of that nature?
Yes.
Yeah, we listed some of those conditional uses in the staff report there, office or intimate business meetings, wedding breakfasts, bottling of grape juice from the vineyard there, the yoga health complimentary boutique shop.
This is the next, another item on the agenda, but with the red barn, that seemed like that was kind of, again, partially gonna be a boutique shop too, as well as other items, a farmer's market type thing.
Yes, in the commercial
So-
farm zone, we had the need to be able to have ancillary revenue generation in order to maintain viability. And one of the things was farm to table, or where we could sell our produce and so forth. And as we look at particularly the Lindon's future plan, there are three things that Lindon City residents expected from what it is they want on the master plan. Number one was preservation of open space. Number two, historical preservation. Number three, some agricultural sort of preservation. The other things were listed that they'd like to have, may possibly a small restaurant or a sandwich shop or things of that sort. And so as we look at how it is that we could maximize our ancillary income, and looking at other venues like Snook Farms in Pleasant Grove and that farm to table, the fresh food, how they have done it and aesthetically they've done it well, we thought, well, how cool would it be to be able to, when your family and friends come and your grandchildren, to be able to take them to the farm of where you could enjoy the ambience of the farm itself, the animals. You could have your BYU ice creamery. You could have a small sandwich shop that features the produce of which we've had that within that region. So that's the overall goal for the Red Barn. And I should point out, the Red Barn is a 100-year-old historical barn of Lindon, one of the few remaining structures that's still intact. It was the Wigington barn built in 1910 where Los Hermanos was, and it was moved when Los Hermanos turned into Los Hermanos. They needed the parking, and so we moved that to the farm, and the plans are such with Mr. Dane to keep that aesthetics inside of the original timbers, and so you have that old world ambience of, and still see Timpanogos.
Well, I know Mike's got some information on that, and that's great. I just wondered if there wasn't kind of some crossover between the two buildings, but sounds like it'd be separate functions.
Sounds like it's a process of discovery.
Sounds like you're trying to decide. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, the next one is the amended site plan and conditional use permit, like we were just talking about with the Red Barn. Mr. College proposes to turn that into a retail building. I think he just went through the uses that he would like to see there. Again, this does meet our setback and height requirements. Go to the building here. This is what the finished product would look like. Again, does meet our minimum standards for that as it currently sits. This is a little hard to see. Let me try to zoom in here. So here's the Red Barn. This is their site plan. Parking. So you've got this asphalt drive that we're going to talk about more here in a few minutes. Right now you'd have 90-degree parking along the asphalt drive with some parallel parking on the west side of that drive. Any questions on that building or the site plan? Okay. Okay, last application, and then we're going to talk about one other item. Okay, so the other item is a rezone of 2 parcels from R120 to commercial farm zone. These 2 properties were divided off of different, for example, this property here, which is on 150 East, the back portion of this was divided off and is being used as a construction storage yard. It does have a concrete fence around the perimeter to shield the construction yard, but it's currently zoned R120. We gave Mr. Wadley, or Mr. College, sorry, Mr. College noticed that this needed to be rezoned to commercial farm, and also that it needed to be consolidated into the commercial farm property because it's landlocked, it doesn't meet frontage requirements, it doesn't meet the minimum lot size, so it needed to be consolidated here. Same with this property that's behind his new home, that also needs to be rezoned from R120, or that's the request, I should say, is to rezone that from R120 to commercial farm zone and be consolidated into that property. So those are the 2 proposals for that. Couple conditions of approval, that the applicant will combine the 2 parcels with the overall acreage of Wadley Farms development, and then a 7-foot masonry or concrete fence be installed to screen the property. So that would be from this parcel as well as this one here, because those are both zoned R120. So they would need that screening and requirement. So any questions on the 2 rezones?
Just to confirm, with those 2 properties added, there still is enough agricultural to maintain?
Yes. Yep. He has to maintain at least 40% of the property as agricultural use. So, and it does still meet that requirement.
Okay.
So I think the thing you need to consider is that appropriate to rezone these from R120 to commercial farm? does it protect the neighborhood? Does it, how does it benefit both the neighborhood and, also what Mr. College is trying to do, but to bring these also into conformance?
I think the fact that it triggers the 7-foot masonry walls, as we've talked in many times, is not cheap. And so the fact that he's able to put that in, once again, to protect, that is the protecting element, I believe. Correct?
That can be one, yes, yep. So finally, this evening, we want to talk about the general plan and our city codes and what they have to say about connectivity with our roads and not only for vehicles but pedestrians. The city, in our general plan, we try to coordinate a street network. Part of that network is Main Street. As you can see from the map on the right, that's the length of Main Street there in our community. Wadley Farms, that's the only missing link of Main Street. If you look at our future land use, sorry, not our future land, but this is our general plan map. It's our street master plan map. This, in 1995, identified connecting Main Street through that area. You'll also see that you've got 450 north and 480 north that dead end on to where Main Street would go. The proposal is that those need to connect to be able to meet fire code requirements. And we'll talk about that in just a second. Again, it was first identified in 95. You can see the two streets here, 480 north and 450 north. Those were both on the subdivision plats identified with temporary turnarounds at the ends of those streets. You can see the pictures here. One of the concerns from city staff is, what happens at the entrance if, the city has an emergency? How do people get out 450 or 480? 480, for example, has a lot of duplexes as part of that private development. And so what do we do to help remedy that? And the general plan has always, since 95, has considered Main Street going through there. Couple other things as you look at our city codes. The Lindon City Code 1724-100, this applies to general standards for conditional use permits. It says, in the event that the land contained within a development is traversed by a proposed major street shown in the master plan, such development shall be designed and in accordance therewith, and the right-of-way across the development for the major street shall be dedicated to the public. This has been in the city code since 1985. And so as the city reviews conditional use permits throughout the city, this is something we need to consider. And this would kick in that discussion this evening with the Planning Commission and the City Council about Main Street. I listed this in the general plan considerations in your staff report as well. Just looking at connectivity, looking at through streets. And so securing rights of way for land development, concurrent with land development. One of the things is we look at the red barn, that the parking for the red barn would be on a future right of way for Main Street. And so how does that parking affect the ability to put Main Street in at some point when that decision is made? So I think that's my last slide on there. Just look over my notes on that.
Mike,
Yeah,
but on this discussion on the Main Street, that is just a discussion item this evening. That's not part of a motion.
yes, thanks for bringing that up. So I did not include that as part of the motion. I wanted to bring that up as part of this discussion. In your recommendation, if you feel that Main Street needs to go in, then you need to add that as a condition of approval, as either as part of the Red Barn conditional use permit.
Okay, but the parking for the Red Barn is being proposed to be in that Main Street right away, though.
Yes, and one of the conditions of approval that I put in there was that when Main Street does go in, that parking would be relocated at the owner's expense because it's looking at putting it on a future right-of-way that's identified. So, Brian, did I miss anything? Okay. Okay. There's a lot more detail in your staff report on each one of these items that hopefully you had a chance to go through. So I'd be glad to answer any questions. I know Mr. College has a presentation as well that he'd like to make, then we can go from there.
Let's listen to his presentation first.
Yeah, let's go ahead and listen to that presentation, and then then we'll ask questions to Mr. College or staff, and then we will accept comments or questions from residents.
So I just put together a brief overview of kind of where we've been and where we are now. So do you have a remote, Mike? Do you want me to take the clicker?
I can. If it doesn't, I'll click them for you. I'll do it. You just tell me next.
So this is the original deed to Wadley Farms. It's 160 acres, which is the majority of Lindon, which was granted in 1869. So Wadley Farms is still, it's very difficult to find a farm that's still been in existence 160 years. Next. You'll have to go fast, Mike. There you go. Mike's talked about how in 2011 we did an unprecedented move to try to preserve the farm. And that was the primary reason for the farm was to allow for agricultural production, to produce agricultural products. Next. And it was pointed out within this zone that it was to be a holding zone, that it was to be a commercial farm holding zone until such time as the Anderson Farm or as Bella Vista or as Cheryl Thomason or Terry Thomason's became economically infeasible to continue farming and you subdivide. And at that time, then it would revert back to residential. Next. And the primary purpose, and I think this is critical, to promote, preserve agricultural production and promoting open space throughout the city and allowing associated commercial activities to be used as an added revenue source to help sustain and support agricultural industry in Lindon. And as you saw in the master plan, right now only 0.7% of Lindon's land is agriculturally produced. And it's projected in the future master plan in 10 years, it'll be 0. So as we talk about a little bit of a country, for the most part, that'll be a thing of the past because you say, how can landowners even do what it is that we're trying to do? And the answer is they can't. It's not feasible. So we have two dimensions in the commercial farm zone, our agricultural production and then the commercial. Agricultural, how have we done in the last 10 years? Next. So this is 1993, and as you well know, our development of our agricultural lands rapidly eroding. Next. And this is not an uncommon sight throughout Utah. It's projected that the population in Utah County will double by the year 2035 and triple by the year 2050. And a fresh peach will be a thing of the past in Utah County. Right now, we only produce 2% of the food we eat, other than dairy and meat products, in Utah. The rest is brought in. Next. And this is your Anderson Farm. Next. And of course, you know what's occurring. You're very much involved with Lindon's Main Street. Our State Street, as people drive through, for the most part, it's indistinguishable from Murray or Orem. Next. As you know, in the last 2 years, we've turned over 110 prime agricultural land to business and homes, and I get it. The Anderson Farms, the Temple site, and so forth. Next. So here we've got this unique 18-acre oasis that we have tried to preserve, and it's been a passion. I've been blessed with a good job, and as such, we've been able to work this in such a manner that when people come to Lindon, they do experience a little bit of country, and that it can be preserved in the future. But the decisions are now in that I'm passing it on to the sixth generations. There's 5 of my children. We've set it up so it can go on into perpetuity. But the taxes, the financial load to maintain this is significant. Next. So over the last 10 years, we planted over 1,200 grapevines and harvested over 5,000 gallons of grape juice and continue with that market. Next. Next. We've planted over 5,000 trees, I dare say more than Lindon itself, in trying to preserve this, I guess, counter to the ozone and the carbon dioxide problem. Next. We've produced over 35,000 boxes of fruit. Next. 40 beef cattle. Next. Now on the commercial side, as you know, you visited, we have our barn, and that was my hay barn, and as my accountant says, I was hobby farming. You have to make money on the farm to continue your farm, and so it was when someone in the ward asked if they could have their wedding in my hay barn that we evolved the barn into the reception barn. And there's the Airbnb on the next side on the left. Next. That's the Airbnb, and next. In fact, if you look at top unique places for Airbnbs in Utah, the state, they list Park City, St. George, and both Deseret News, and this was Travel and ABC in Utah. Wadley Farms is listed in the top 10. So people who come to the farm, and they come from all over, and we meet them from even Europe, and they get to see this country and experience Lindon as in a way that I don't think they could have otherwise. Next. There's another one, Deseret News. Next. So as Sharon, Mrs. Call pointed out, it's a process of we evolved in the chateau into another Airbnb, not to do anything to circumvent city code. It was just an organic development. Next. And so the castle, as you've been there to many events, has become kind of a center for unique entities. Next. And the reason I show this is my wife. I told her if she would have married up, she wouldn't have had to stain floors when she's 70 or park cars. Many nights we're out there parking cars. But the reason I show that this has been a family affair, and all the work has been done with ourselves. It's not somebody coming in and banging out as a contractor. Next. So we have the castle. Next. We wanted to have more of an exclusive entrance into the farm, and so along Main Street, that's how it looked. I went to the city in 2017 and approached them about developing that entrance there. They mandated I do 3 things. Number one, that I give them 8 feet. I moved a fence in 8 feet. I wanted to have a side obscuring fence and a soundproofing fence. So I bought these cement panels from the freeway, and it's taken me 4 years to put them in. I got a building permit from the city. It was inspected by the building inspectors. And I had to have each one of my residents that bordered that sign off that they were in agreement for that fence to be put in. I had the city engineer, along with the city planner at that time, Hugh, come along and make certain everything I was doing was in compliance. Next. And that's the building permit for that fence along there. Next. These are the city panels. Every panel you see I set with a crane myself, with my crew. And these aren't easy things to move or set. Each one has about 7 yards of concrete underneath, and it was no small project. Next. We've done many charitable events at the farm. This is one for cancer. I think last year we contributed well over to $100,000 in charitable events. Next. We've had BYU with their random acts. They've come and done 2 different episodes here. Next. Our biggest event we've had at the farm is what we did with Lindon's Life Hacks. We had more people here at the farm than we had ever. We had to park them in the pasture, but it was very highly attended, but that was sponsored by Lindon. Next. Dave Archuleta's Christmas concert. Next. many Harry Potter events. Next. The Utah Metropolitan Ballet, we donate heavily to them. Next. Story Trek's been here. Next. We had free concerts and would like to continue to do so. Next. Dinner in the Vineyards. Next. The mayor brought all the other mayors in Utah County over for this last fall when we crushed grape juice. It was a great honor to have him here. Next. Valentine's dinner dance. Some of you have come to those. Next. We've had 3 movies shot here. One was shot last week. These are Hallmark movies. One was shot last week. Next. Next. So our ultimate goal is to make this so it's a premier destination for family events. We don't wish it to be a compound that's exclusive for the farm. We wish it's not going to be amusement park with rides. It's going to be where you can come and this deep DNA of our agrarian roots, which we all have, where it's still preserved. We plan on it going as it has done for another 160 years in the future, if it's done right. And so that's our goal, Tanner.
Yeah, so as he has said, as we can see, the example's been set that it's very hard to maintain this agricultural space. And so as the next generation, we have to look at.
He wants you to talk in the microphone. Okay.
As we look at from the next generation, we have to look for additional sources of revenue, and kind of that model is that agritourism model. Using this history of agrarian roots in finding ways that we can bring other people and create additional sources of revenue. Like he said, just the events alone, we're always going to have to continue and expand on that. So that's part of this process of discovery, of looking at what other people have done and kind of setting that example for other people of what we can essentially come up with and work with the city and hopefully in compliance to make that happen.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay.
I should point out for the future, we figure in developing the plaza around the castle next, where it's a gathering place. So we have this plaza now, and we have the new entrance, and we have this open space where we can have our artisans, jewelry shops or jewelry making or things of that sort next. A place where you can come and have your dinner in an exclusive environment. Lunch next. We want to have walking trails to the farm and orchards. Two true stories. I've had a lady thank me for letting her daughter come pick an apple because she had no idea where apples came from. And I had another guy said to me, he was walking through the pasture. He says, "Daddy, what's that?" And he says, "Well, that's cow poop." And he says, "Daddy, you mean they don't use the potty?" And so we laugh at that, but as you drive up I-15 and you see this high-density housing and what people are now relegated to, of which we've been blessed to be able to experience, we want to maintain that. Next. So the like I say, the Wigington barn into a store, restaurant, a unique environment. Next. The Red Barn store. Next. So community events and festivals we wish to have, harvest festivals, spring blossom festivals, concerts, the restaurants, our grape juice, Wadley Farms. Next. This all fits very nicely into the master plan, and we've given our input to the plan to Mike Florence and Adam Cowie to make certain that there is, when Lindon's wish is preserved, of an agricultural, historical preservation, historical buildings, and agrarian roots. Next. So that's our mission. That's what we have done. Like I say, it's been very labor intensive, as most of you know, and it's been extremely costly to do it, but we've done it. So
Well, Wadley Farms is beautiful. The only thing I'm really disappointed on is you don't have a picture of your pink trees and blossom. There's some history there of how much I've loved those, and I loved them again this year.
Thank you.
But it is a beautiful facility. We just have got to make sure all the approvals are done the way we need to. Does anyone have additional questions for staff or for Mr. College and well, Mr. and Mr. College?
I'd like to hear the community comments before
Okay,
I have
okay.
some thoughts.
Could I just ask one
Okay.
question? Currently, you listed 6 properties, or 6 residential uses. And one of them was the farmhouse. But the 7th for the farmhouse, would they think of adding, like dividing that into a bed and breakfast and still a residence? Or why the 7th?
It would, because it would allow them to come back for a conditional use permit in the future and turn the farmhouse into just a bed and breakfast use.
Because it's already listed as one of the residences, so that's one of the 6. So I guess I don't know why we'd need a 7th.
Well, if they decided to,
That's,
yeah, go ahead.
that is true.
Right, I don't think they need a 7th to convert that.
Yeah, I was counting wrong on that, but
So that was just my question, because it's, unless they divided it into 2 or whatever, but that is already in there, so
good catch on
I
that.
think that'd
One
be
of
all
the
6.
current rentals, or one of the bed and breakfasts that we have proposed right now, has an additional room that is not being used as a bed and breakfast. It's more maintenance and cleaning facilities. So I think when we suggested that 7th room, would allow for that to be used as part of that bed and breakfast, which is currently not being used, but it's all a part of that same unit, if that makes sense.
How many acres, Alan, are we talking total?
About 18 acres.
18 acres. So 7 per 18 acres.
Yeah, so that's, if this
But
property
Mike,
were to
there-
ever go away, I fear what might go in there instead.
Goodness.
I guess that's something we would have to work out at,
But I thought you explained to me that if the farmhouse wasn't used as a bed and breakfast eventually, that they could have one additional unit somewhere else on the farm? That was allowing for that? If the farmhouse stayed owner occupied? I thought maybe I was
I
mixed
think
up
you-
on that.
yeah, you did ask that question. Yeah, I was under the assumption that the farmhouse would just be converted to a or to a bed and breakfast. I hadn't heard about the extra space up until now. So, yeah, I think we just have to consider, are we going to allow 6 or are we going to allow 7 now with the information we have?
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that
Okay.
clarification.
No, that's
No,
great.
thank you as well.
Okay. We're going to open this up for public comment, and we ask that you keep your comments brief, that you state your name when you give your comments, and maybe we could ask the colleges to take the chairs and so that we can ask public to come up to the microphone, so those who are listening online can also hear those comments. So if you'd like to come up, and then just state your name and.
My name is Robert Gardner. Can I invite my wife,
Sure,
Jeannie, to
that's
come
fine.
up also? So we are the neighbors that have been mentioned that are directly to the east of the colleges. We've lived here for 35 years. Been neighbors for almost that time. We were here before Alan got here. And
Before Alan came back.
And I just got to say something really quick, because he made a lot of the points I want to make. But he did mention in his nice presentation about when they raised some beef cattle. This was a long time ago. And they had a fellow come with a truck to slaughter them right on the property there. And was it Preston or Tanner? Tanner, who you met. he was out there watching them, and after they'd finished killing the cattle, he turned to his mom and said, "Are you gonna do the dog next?" So we have a lot of experience with them, and in general, we love the colleges and have had good neighbors for a long time, but there are some things going on here that really concern us. And as I said, Alan made some of those points. He said the best indication of the future is what has happened in the past. And he mentioned how the shops have moved around on the property. And
If you want to, if you look at the picture there where the arrow is pointing, says proposed new commercial building on the right-hand side of the screen, and there's a green lawn behind that. That's our property right there, so you know where that building that was supposed to be the shop is 10 feet off of our property line, right in the back of us. Just so you know where it is.
And I don't
20
think,
feet, sorry.
I don't think we ever got a really good look at that, but in your presentation, you had at least one shot of that.
At the front
Of that proposed commercial building. And its proposal, as I understood, was to be as a kind of conference center.
It'd be probably, yeah, more business sort of meeting, possibly wedding breakfast, people would rent it out.
People would rent it out. Would they stay overnight? Would it be
No.
along the lines of that?
It's not a bed and breakfast type thing.
Okay. Well, so you can see the height of that. It's 35 feet. And, you know, my presentation wasn't as nice, but I sent some emails to the Planning Commission. Did you forward those to the
They have.
commissioners here? Photos that show the height of that and the height of it in relation to the property around it. And I've got to tell you, we're right there. We watched it built from the get-go. We were told it was a shop. And in no fashion of imagination would you have ever said that's going to be a shop. I think, well, my wife told me not to use too many really big words, but I would say disingenuous is how it was presented. She also told me not to use any really short words either. And she just hit me. But that has caused great fear for us. Now, you know, we're not here in opposition to the chateau. We realize that this is a done deal. It's built. But it wasn't built under the impression that was given out by the city as a shop or given out by the colleges that it's going to be a shop. And now we're faced with the proposal that really concerns us.
Which, if you want to go back to the,
Now
where
if
it
you can go
shows
back to the
property,
plot.
the plot map. Since we didn't,
You can see there the one that says, where is it?
well, on the right, yeah. Right, so that's the building, and then
Oh, you've got,
kind of underneath his proposed new commercial building is the lot. So if you went to the one that shows the red lots that he wants to
yeah,
put
could you
commercial.
bring that one up? So our concern is, and we've lived next to this for a couple of years now, our concern is that these two want to be converted to commercial farm.
Well, he said he was gonna put orchard or vineyard on the other one, so that, the only one
And-
we're concerned with is the one right.
No,
next to
actually,
us.
I thought, and we tried to put it in our email, I thought we had a good suggestion. And I also put in our email that we feel like the grumpy old man, grumpy is the key word, that you see in the Disney movie Up, where finally you see that he's surrounded by walls and huge buildings. Those buildings are already there. There's the chateau that's immediately to our northwest. There's this new commercial building that was supposed to be a shop. That's immediately to our west. And then now immediately to our south, there's the proposal for this plot that is going to hold another shop.
And he said in his presentation, that's where they want to put the shop.
That's where they want to put the shop.
And
And
that's
we
what want.
suggested initially that it be the one that's further south there, lower down, that they could put their shop and, you know, all their construction detritus there, rather than the one that is right next to us, because we've already got a lot of buildings around us, big buildings. But I,
Oh, yeah, it's a big building.
the
Not quite as, I mean, it's probably, I don't know what the square footage of the building is.
the commercial building?
Yeah.
Well, they're no bigger than a house.
No,
Well, we
But-
already have the one that's
but I wouldn't-
proposed to be converted, that's
they-
right there. The shop that is building, you don't have any plans drawn up for it or anything, do you? Is it a one-story, two-story building? Two?
two.
This one's a two-story.
The new one that's not built would be a one-story.
The one on the south.
Okay, so we had a suggestion that instead they put that building down further south, so we wouldn't have to have it right on us, right there. Over the course of this meeting, though, I've come up with what I think is a great idea. I love the idea of the vines and the vineyards, and they're already ordered.
They could put
How
them there.
much more it would be, better would it be aesthetically, even for Wadley Farms, if the vineyard could go there, in that one that is in the proposal, the one that also happens to be right next to us. And if the shop and the commercial building could be conveniently located closer to their entrance and down further south.
Well, those
So
will
that's-
be decisions they'll have to make and work with us.
Yeah, they'll have to make that, but I want,
You need to calm down. I wanted to make a point when you were talking about the walls. The walls were supposed to shield things. There is a wall built between, he put one in behind us before that newest shop, now commercial building, was built. Because if you look at the map there, all of the parking is right behind us with all of its streetlights. And our property, you can't tell in that, is the back is lower and it's up, so our house is higher. So all of those lights shine right in to our house. The wall does not shield the house because the house is up on a slight rise. The wall that's there right now, I was just out there the other day doing yard work. When it was put in, it did not have all the engineering and everything that he was talking about that they did on the wall over by Main Street. He had to come in later because it was leaning. It was going to fall into our property, and the solution to that was to drill holes into the wall where all of the cement on the backside fell out, and then just put cables through and attach it to the uprights. Several of the panels have great big cracks in them at this point already. And when they were actually installed, a number of them have great big, because they were used panels, and I understand that it's expensive to put those things in, but when they were installed, several of them already had great big chunks already broken out of the top of them. So it's not just a pretty wall that's back there. Didn't ever look good even from when it was originally put in. And now it has some major structural problems as well. And he wants to now put that, so when it said that there's a 7-foot wall around that property, that wall does not exist on that property as of now. They started putting it between where, to the east of that property, they started putting a wall in. When he installs any of these walls, I have not looked at the one over where Main Street is, so I don't know what it looks like, but all the rest of them are all mismatched panels over on our side as well, so they don't. Anyway,
Okay.
so you understand.
We do, and we appreciate your comments very much. I just have one question. How much from, there's the 10-foot setback, that is required, from where that building is, that's next to you, that's required. 20 foot, I mean. Okay, how much, as far as your lawn area to where your actual home is?
We
how
have,
much?
but we have an acre, so it's not right on the,
So there is quite a bit of lawn space and that type of thing between.
except that when we're in the backyard, it's right, you know, it's right there. The playground for our grandchildren is right there in the
Right.
very back of
Right.
the lot and those
Right.
kinds of
Right.
things.
Okay.
And we just want, I'll just finish with this. The only thing we're asking for is not another building right beside us. In other words, he's trying to do lots of good things everywhere, and the other parts of the property are beautiful. They're just not right behind us and around us. We would just really respectfully ask that the recommendation be that stay free from any more shops or buildings. That's
Okay.
what we're asking for.
Okay, we appreciate your comments on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, are there others that would like to make comment or ask questions?
Any chance Jeremy King, any chance I get to talk about walkable cities, I do, and I come in and talk to Mike from time to time. From Jeff Speck, I've read his book, Walkable Cities. He says, car-dependent development is destructive to our health, our economy, our environment, and our social fabric. And as I've only been here 5 years, but State Street in 5 years is twice as busy, I swear. And it only seems to be getting busier. There's this conversation of, should we allow these boutique bed and breakfasts in there in this little retail barn? And it's like, why not? Do we need to put all of that on State Street so we can just get in our cars and drive to it? Or can we do things that are a little bit back in the community? And that's tough because you guys have a big set of guidelines that you have to follow. And for legal purposes, you have to be consistent. And that's your challenge, right? But done right, and usually the execution of this is where people fail, but done right, there shouldn't be any problem putting that in. Lighting, to me, seems like the biggest issue because I live just a block off of State Street and these car dealerships. I mean, I planted 20 trees just on that one side because of the lighting. So I think it's the execution of these ideas that are more critical to me than the idea of having a boutique bed and breakfast or retail shop. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, are there others? Go ahead, sir.
Just a moment. Thank you all.
Yeah,
I know some
good to have
of
you
you,
here.
some of you I have not met, but I was the mayor when this was created. And we really were plowing new ground at the time, and we were just seeing one orchard after another go down and thought, what can we do? We tried this, and it's really been a work in progress, and I would say the expert here is Alan about, how it's been working. But as I see what happened at Walker Farms and what happened at Wadley Farms, I mean, those are my two favorite spots in the city. When I stop at that intersection at Walker Farms and see that tree lit up at night, it's like, can I go back around and look one more time? In addition to the other stuff he's doing with the animals. Alan's the same way. This is a beautiful, beautiful spot. Now, Sharon, you asked the question, and it's a legitimate question. How come you got the cart before the horse on some of this? And I've heard the word disingenuous. I wouldn't agree with that at all. I think it's overly passionate. Anybody who knows Alan very well knows how passionate he is. I'm sort of that way. I kind of feed his fire, but I don't have the ability to do what he does. But I remember once I bought a bunch of old windows out of Page School, and I thought, okay, next thing I'm going to do is build a little greenhouse in my backyard. I live on the corner of 4th East and 4th North. I started building that thing, and when I was almost done, I measured it and called Phil on the phone and said, Phil, I'm in trouble. I'm about 220 square feet, and I was supposed to be under 200 without a building permit. What can I do? It wasn't disingenuous. It was sort of how the thing evolved. And I think Alan's passion is really what drives this. I mean, when you think that he's doing all this in addition to being one of the most prominent physicians in Utah, the guy's amazing. So I think that the one thing I would say about the road, which seems to be one of the issues that's out there, I don't see this as development. This is farming. This is an alternative to development. If you go in there and build cul-de-sacs and half-acre building lots and put 30-foot, I mean, how tall can you build a home, Mike? 30?
35.
30. You know, you could put 30-foot homes looking into people's backyard all through there. Every building lot could have a huge home in it. This is an alternative to that. And I think until that trigger is pulled, if and when it ever is, that's when Main Street triggers. Not because we're gonna put a little Red Barn boutique in to maybe sell peaches and enhance the farm ambiance a little bit. That to me is the key difference here. Alan's not a developer. He's a farmer and he's passionate about his project. And so I would say leave Main Street alone until development occurs. And you talk about, just one more thing. You talk about these temporary turnarounds. They're all over the city. I'll share one with you that I succinctly know about because it's been in my neighborhood, but it was a development called Staghorn Estates, and if anybody knows where Doug Tobler lives, Staghorn Estates came along the crack behind Brown's Homestead. This is about 100 north between 2nd and 4th East. And it went up there and they got to Doug's property and Doug wasn't ready. Doug still wanted to be a farmer. And so they put a temporary turnaround in there. And that'll stay a temporary turnaround until Doug Tobler decides he doesn't want to have cows out there anymore. It might be, when Doug's kids get it, it might be another generation. I mean, these things occur, we live with them, we manage them, we serve them with fire trucks and garbage and all the other city services. And we're gonna be okay if this one waits, in my opinion. Thank you, and thank you for the great work you do.
Thank you very much.
I love your place, by the way.
Thank you.
Okay, sir? Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, I'll wait.
Okay.
Jim Peters. I'm a neighbor to Allen College also. I'm to the north of Wadley Farms. There's been some talk on the last subject was on Main Street going through. First, I wanted to just say that Allen College is a good neighbor to have. Whenever we've had a problem, and we've had a couple, him and his wife come knocking on my door and we sit down in my living room and we talked it out. I think that Allen is concerned about the community. I don't think he's trying to do anything that is detrimental to the community, and he has the right attitude about the community. He does a lot of volunteer work. Whenever the city or the church wants to have some kind of meeting at his barn, he donates it. These concerts in the orchard, I've been to those. Wonderful. Just bring your chair and come sit down for free. All that costs money. And when you have someone like that who's trying to contribute to the community, I think that the city needs to be aware of that they don't take the position of being in the ivory tower and just demanding things happen. Give you an example, I served on the Planning Commission for 15 years, served with Sharon. At the other end of Main Street, just north of this project, Ivory Homes went in. But there was a developer came in there to put that project in, and by the time the city got done with all the requirements to that contractor, he went belly up. I remember one of the neighbors came in and demanded that they not have to contribute to that part of Main Street because they weren't going to develop their property. So the developer had to do it. We put a lot of other requirements on him. Eventually, Ivory Homes is the only ones that finished that project because that contractor went broke. One of the last items we talked about was completing Main Street. And the logic is because it's on the master plan. one thing that wasn't brought up is 480 that comes in from, on the Green Valley condos, that's a private street. I don't know anybody here from Green Valley condos, but I guarantee you they don't want that street to go through. I've offered to put in a walkway so they could walk to church from their homes, and they didn't want it. They like their community the way it is. The Allen got the go-ahead to finish a section of Main Street from my house down, and he did it first class. He put in curb gutter, sidewalk, completed the street. When developers come in, they usually get reimbursed for their money that they put into those streets by selling lots. But with Wadley Farms, he footed the whole bill because it's just bordering that farm. He's not planning on dividing those lots up and selling them on Main Street. He's put in concrete walls around there, put in a blacktop turnaround, finished the storm drain through there, ran that wall all the way down to 400. And now the city is saying, we want to put in Main Street. Tear all that out. I don't remember them telling him that 2 or 3 years ago before he did all the development, that, hey, in a few years, we're going to make you just tear this all out and put in Main Street. So not only did he have to put all those improvements in on his own, but now the city's going to say, we want you to put Main Street in too, and double the cost on him. So I don't think that's quite fair for the city to do that. And I don't see the purpose of completing Main Street in that section. I remember on Planning Commission, this has been 25 years ago, the city decided they wouldn't put Main Street finished through until Pleasant Grove completed 700 North or 900 North. That has never been done. So that street really doesn't go anywhere. It's not a through street. Also, you've got a elementary school on Main Street, and they don't even know what they're going to do with it now. They're closing it down, so we don't know. So I think the decision to complete Main Street in that section is way premature. We don't know what's going to happen yet, and I think that the city really made their decision about that street a few years ago when they asked Allen College to put in those improvements, and he did it all. I think the decision to close that street was done then. I don't think you can come back and tell him to do it now. So.
Thank you for your comments. Okay. Sir,
He answered, he asked, there
Okay.
kind of hit my
would you like
points.
to come up?
Thank you.
I'm Jason Reynolds.
Okay.
Yeah, I predate the Gardners. I moved here in 1980. I was just a child, though. My parents bought the property. It's just east of the chateau.
Mr. Reynolds, if you'll just pull the mic a little closer to you.
Yeah. So I own the property now that's just east of the chateau. My parents purchased it in 1980. A lot of things have changed over the years, some for the better, some for the worse. Growing up there, it was always a quiet area. Now, it's like during the summertime, there's not really a day that goes by besides Sundays where there's wedding speeches, loud music, parties. The building, the chateau, when it was built, I believe it was supposed to be a shop as well, then turned into an Airbnb. And like we've lost all of our privacy from that, but what's done is done. There's several nights where people are out on the patio, talking, partying it up, having a good time, which is fine. We just deal with it. But I'm just concerned that going forward, more shops are going to be built, more Airbnbs are going to be converted from those shops, and the noise is going to keep getting louder and louder.
I think one of the reasons for the actions we're taking is that we are putting a limit on how many
At
Airbnbs could
7.
be put in there.
Right.
And, well, 7 housing units, that's not 7 Airbnbs. That would be with the single-family homes and the accessory apartment above the garage, so it would be a maximum of 4 Airbnbs, and there's already 3.
Okay, well, yeah, but then also, it's like, everyone's been saying like, oh, communities, like the houses, if there's houses there and all that, but houses, like, communities don't have wedding facilities that are loud with music and speeches all the time. I'm just concerned that it's just gonna keep escalating and going from there.
Have you ever had a conflict where you went and talked to Alan about something and he didn't respond to it?
No, like Alan's been great. He's been a great neighbor. It's just like when we're out in the backyard, like my wife, like sometimes she likes to jog through our yard, and she stops because there's people just watching her on the patio. And so I feel like we can't utilize our acre the way we want to because there's just not as much privacy.
Okay.
Yeah. But
Thank you so much for your comments. Okay.
My name is James Gardner. I'm the son of Robert and Jeannie Gardner, who started out earlier. I had one initial question, which I guess I came back to my mind because you just said one of the things that is on the table is putting a limit on the bed and breakfast and all of that kind of stuff. I just wanted to clarify and make sure that I was understanding correctly. So, because it seemed to me that there is a limit and that they're not currently in compliance with that they're above the limit, and this ordinance change that's on the table is specifically just to bump it up so that they are within the limit. So you saying, oh, well, we're putting a limit on that, so we don't need to worry about new things going in, more noise. It seems like every time that something has gone in that hasn't been in compliance, or every time he's wanted to do something, that the change has been made. And it feels like that's probably going to continue into the future unless we see some limit that sticks. I also wanted to just point out, it's interesting, I think my dad mentioned this already, the location of the new vineyard. I believe that's immediately north of what would be the new primary residence, correct? No?
Yeah, just north, you're correct.
Right, okay, yeah. So there are 2 parcels that the proposition was to rezone those, and one of them is going to be a vineyard, and that's the one that's right next to the college's house. I also noticed that around the farmhouse, there's the farmhouse, and then there's the barn, and then it's surrounded by, beautiful trees and everything. Every time that there's a building that has an ugly back or something that needs a big cement wall put around it, that's put next to the neighbors. There's no shop that's going in next to their residence, and I think it's pretty clear that if it was pleasant to have those buildings going in, the pleasant things go next to where Alan's gonna live. And the unpleasant things go next to where his neighbors live. And if the stated goal of this property is to preserve the open space and the agriculture, it doesn't feel like that. Alan even mentioned in his presentation that, Disney doesn't put the shop out front where everyone sees it, and that's true. It's beautiful. We really love the way it looks from the front. Everything that's in there that was in all the pictures in the presentation, and when you drive past on 400 North, it's beautiful. But it's not beautiful from the back, and our concern is that it's going to get less and less beautiful there because that's the area that is essentially proposed to put the ugly stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to take, go ahead, we're going to take 1 or 2 more comments, and then we're going to bring it back to the commission for discussion. Go ahead.
My name is Melissa Grenko. I've also been in Lindon all my life. We are also close neighbors to the colleges. We are right on that corner just south of the vineyard. So we're on Main Street and 400 North, and we hear noise too. And the 2 points that I keep thinking of as this has been discussed is I think what he's trying to do is preserve as much, like he said, open space as possible. And to do that, you do have to have resources and income, and that has to come from somewhere. And so I'm like, if that goes away, what is going to be put there? Is it going to be giant apartment buildings? And then it really will be walled in, right? Are those ugly? Sometimes those big apartment buildings are ugly. And so it's like, how many of those things? I would rather have a few ugly buildings around me than a bunch of big apartment buildings, which is a possibility for the future. The other thing is Main Street. Being on Main Street, I've got a little 18-month-old baby, and I love that she can be in our yard, and Main Street isn't too busy right now. And we do have a fence, you know, and we've got trees along Main Street. And my concern is, you know, it's not even just his beautiful orchard that we could be losing trees to. It would be on my property and on my parents' property, who are next door, a lot of trees along Main Street if, you know, if it requires curb and gutter. So it's like, it's kind of a thing for not just his property, but the people on 450 and 480. We all have interest in it and understand that he's trying to do the best he can to keep it nice here in Lindon. So those are the only two things.
Thank you so much. Okay, one more comment, and then we're gonna bring it back up to the commission. Okay, we'll take two more comments. Okay, go ahead, and then we'll take one more here.
Sorry
and then
about that.
Then we're gonna close the public hearing.
My name is Richard Ron. I am Melissa's dad. And the concern that I have with putting Main Street through is 400 North already seems like a superhighway. Cars racing up and down, 360, 7 days a week, 365, 24 hours a day. And if we put Main Street through, is that going to become yet another superhighway through what really is a little, like we've said, a little bit of country town? And we're losing that as we dispense with, the green spaces, and as we put in more and more roads. I know that the road that Mr. Dane lives on is an awfully busy road. People going between Lindon and Pleasant Grove. I have to wonder if we really need another busy road in our neighborhood. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, you're coming up together. I assume you have the same, you have,
I'm Cindy
compliments to make.
Rogers. This is my little sister, Lily Rogers. Our dad is out of town, and he told us we need to come, and so we listened to Dad.
Okay.
But actually, we live right in the residence of that North Red Square where Alan has purchased that back half of our lot. And we just would like to support all of the college's decisions. We've lived there for 14 years now, and so we grew up with the castle being put in, and us as girls have always been like, Alan's building us a castle and everything. With the comments of like being more towards of the backside of the like popular side, I guess, things are expensive and we get that, but we're also such big supporters of recycling materials that would have just gone to waste, and they're not just plain cement walls. We prefer there's color, there's texture. It's nothing crazy, and with like the concern of us living on a hill, the wall's super nice because the view from our lots along 150 East, you still get like all the city lights and the lakes and the mountains in the background, and the walls don't cover that. Sorry, we're very new at this. We're probably the youngest ones in here. But, sorry, lost my train of thought. But with like light and pollution and like noise and everything, Alan has always been super respectful about trying to keep that for the neighbors. I've personally worked for Alan in the castle and barn for several years, and it's every bride's one day, but like if they're pushing limits, like Alan's the first to go in and just shut their music off because it's not just a business, he is a neighbor, he is a friend, and he likes to respect those relationships and keeps those going. And so, yeah, we support Alan and his decisions moving forward, so.
Okay. Did you have additional comments?
She was emotional support.
The only thing I would have to say is I like having Alan around because it does give, like, especially my family, give us all, like, job experiences and to be able to work in a field that you can work around other people. And it just helps support our family, really.
Thank
very
you,
much.
guys.
We're going to go ahead and close the public hearing. I think we've heard a lot of comments. And we'll bring the discussion back up to the commission.
I move to close the public hearing.
Okay, do I have a second? Okay, motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the voting is unanimous. Anyone want to lead off the discussion?
You know what, could I lead off?
Yeah,
Sure.
let's just go down the line.
I've got a former commitment I need to leave to, so I would like to go first if I can. It seems like one of the hot topics here tonight that may come up after I leave is Main Street. And so I'd like you to know on the record where I stand on that. I'm totally with what former Mayor Daines suggested. I'm not suggesting that come off the master plan. It probably ought to stay on there if this farm were not able to make a go of things, that would be the time that street, when 40 new homes, if they're just on half acres in there, go in and there'll be many 2 stories back and looking into other people's neighbors' yards and whatnot. That's the reality of development, maybe 25 years down the road. But unless and until that goes from a farm to a development, I don't see. There might be other solutions that can remediate any safety concerns without asking Mr. College to complete Main Street. So if that comes up, you can put my vote on that side of the table while I'm gone.
Well, I appreciate that opinion. That's not something that we are actually voting on tonight.
Well, I didn't know, so I
Yeah.
just wanted to know where I stand.
Okay.
Put it as a condition.
Yeah. Okay.
Chairperson, can I just say something really quick?
Sure,
Just 'cause
absolutely.
As the attorney, we're not necessarily gonna be voting on it, but we do have to address it.
We do.
Because our code specifically says, if you have a master plan road and there's development, now, we're not saying that Alan's a developer and he wants to put in this huge thing, but this parcel is developing, this section of the parcel. He's putting in parking stalls, he's taking utilities. This clearly is development, quote unquote, as contained within the code. So we do have to address it. Now, can we come up with an agreement that says, hey, we're not gonna trigger the road until, as has been suggested? Yeah, there's lots of options, but there is something that we do need to look at, and we probably do need to specifically include as part of that condition that we address how this development plays with 1724-140.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I just think there are possibly other options.
Right.
Some barricade, safety gates that could, if one of those streets was blocked off, a major emergency, that you could get out to his temporary street in the case of a catastrophic emergency. But that's where I stand in case, it does sound like it needs to come up, so, thank you.
Okay. Go ahead.
Rob said it's
Rob?
good on the table. I'm interested in the community comments, and it sounds like one thing we're all in agreement with is Alan must be a great neighbor. So, you've earned that. Just a couple of questions, maybe, Alan. It seems like, if I remember right, your lighting is mostly low profile, isn't it? Aren't the poles fairly short?
Yes, we have minimal parking, and of course, they're only on during events, which is probably 3 or 4 nights. It's not.
If there is lighting on the east end, it is fairly easily cured by shields and things like that could be done.
Yeah, I think we could measure our our street light to maybe the gardener's house, and it's gotta be, you know,
Somewhere.
1,000 feet. I mean,
Okay.
unlike any other
Yeah.
home in the.
Okay.
How much lighting do you have in there besides the street light?
When you say the street light, the parking lights.
So the parking lights?
Yeah,
and
I
the-
have, you can look up on Google Earth, but I have 3 per island, and I have 4 islands. And they're 2 LEDs, 75-watt LEDs.
Okay.
It's fairly dim.
And then these new 2 parcels were.
And I should say, they turn off at 10. I mean, they're not like
Okay.
24/7.
We're going to be voting on or recommending approval. They don't currently have block walls around them, dividing the residents from these parcels.
The only one that doesn't is Mrs. Gardner pointed out, and that was between her part, and I've had 2 or 3 discussions. I think the last one was a couple of weeks ago I've asked if they wanted to have 8-foot or 6-foot panels or what have you. But
And that is required, isn't it? So he will be putting that up. So
sounds like 7-foot.
7 foot's required, yeah.
They suggested 6.
You probably put up 8 because 7's hard to get. Okay. So, you know, I sometimes think we don't appreciate the jewel we have in Wadley Farms and Anderson Farms too. They're very, very huge assets to our community. I have a son that lives in El Dorado Hills, California, and just east of them in Placerville is a place called Apple Ridge. I think I've even sent you photos of that, and it's very much like what Alan is doing here. They do have a couple of entrances to the Apple Ridge project, and then within the project there are barns, there are buildings, there are apple orchards, there are processing places, there's bakeries that they bake apple pies, and people come from all over to go there all summer long and just spend time and sit outside and eat the produce that they pick. It's just it's a gem, and I see Alan doing that, and I think, yes, while this is development, I don't see it as a development like subdividing development. It's just improving the different venues within the farm, and I just have a hard time, while legally it might be something we have to address, I don't see it as a development that requires everything to be developed, that Main Street has to go through. I mean, if Main Street goes through and I were in your shoes, I would just move the block wall 50 feet to the east, and what good does that do the city? I mean, it does give them a road, but that, I think, takes away from the ambience of the project. And so, like Mike said, until there's a movement to subdivide the farm and put houses in, I just don't see the need for that Main Street to go through, and I was kind of interested but I didn't hear it tonight, for some of the people that live on those 2 streets to see if they really want it to go through, but I didn't hear that. As far as the shop and having buildings near you, it's always a problem, but if it was a house, it's going to be just as large. It's going to be just as close. And so I don't see that as a real offense to the property there on the street east of the farm.
It would probably, just to clarify, it'd probably have a little bit more setback. These are, at least for this shop, that was a shop, now is going to be a commercial building. It'd be a 30-foot setback instead of 20.
30-foot setback.
If it was residential.
If it was residential, yeah.
Yeah, but that, let's see, by adding the property, does that set it back further? Or it's right up against your property right now? And your property's, what you say, 1,000 feet from the, anyway, I don't know. Anyway, I really see this as a great asset. I hope that we can look at these things. I don't see a need for putting Main Street through right now. I would like to discuss the number of residential on the 18 acres. Eight residential units on 18 acres, and one of which is his own home, doesn't seem a lot to me.
8 or 7?
Or excuse me, 7. Yeah, 7. Doesn't seem a lot to me when one of them is his primary residence. So, anyway. My input.
Okay. Okay, Steve?
I think Brian started to address this, but that was my first question is council's opinion on what constitutes development, and does this constitute development to trigger something in our code? Because, you know, I'm reading the code, looking at Exhibit 7, which was a letter the city sent back in 1994 that says upon development, right, that things would need to be taken care of. So number one, I would like your definition or what you think the code says development is to help guide us.
There are several spots, even on Main Street, just down here, and you probably remember this, our Hawaiian dance studio. They're just a small mom and pop dance studio, but they changed the existing use, and this triggered it because they were there and we made them install all of those improvements, and that's development. Now, so clearly, under a legal definition, this application for the Red Barn is development of the property that impacts the roadway. I think that's the way the city council and the city in the past has been able to massage Main Street, is what Allen had developed before wasn't impacting that right of way, that master plan road, but this is right on top of it. Now, as we were discussing this, Adam brought up an example that I thought is a really good example. Gosh, probably 15 or 20 years ago, Martin Snow, we've got a road down there in his industrial, down Mountain State Still, where he put in a building. The city said, hey, we don't really think that at this point it's just going to take the road out into the middle of nowhere. It's going to be a dead-end parking spot. And it doesn't, the spirit of the law doesn't require a road, but the letter of the law does. And so we came up with an agreement with Martin Snow that we recorded on the property that said, hey, we're going to allow this building to go in, but we're going to reserve the road for a later development. And I think that, Adam pointed that out to us, and I think that there's an opportunity here for us to come to an agreement with Allen that says, hey, we recognize that technically the letter of the law triggers this discussion of whether we're going to make the road go through or not, but we're going to reserve that and put some conditions on what will trigger it. And I really liked what the mayor had said before, that when we take this particular property out of the commercial farm zone, that's just an idea. But that's for you guys to discuss. What do you think we can come up with as an agreement? That's what I meant when I said we have to address this, because we just are not at liberty to disregard and just push this code section aside. We have to at least address it. And I thought that was a pretty good idea.
We weren't all around, and Alan, maybe you can speak to the history. Who designated that as a road through the master plan, through his property?
As far as I can see, in our discussions, we've looked at this, that goes back to our very first master plan, that road there. And I think it's just in a general overall, it does make a whole lot of sense when you're looking at traffic flow for the whole city, connecting into Pleasant Grove. Pleasant Grove has secured all of the roadway for that 800, 900 north section of the road. And we anticipate that they'll be putting that in the next couple of years. They're securing the final grant. So just as a major flow for traffic, it does make sense. It's pretty easy to see why the original planners, when everything was filled, was, you know, saying, hey, this is how we want to lay it out, that grid pattern.
And it first showed up in that 1995 general plan.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to know kind of because one, I do feel like we have a legal responsibility to address it, right? From what I've read and the way it is, and that's helpful to have your opinion as our counsel, so thank you. The other part that, you know, Rob brought it up, but I go a little bit the opposite. I try to think if this was coming pre-build to me, how many properties would I want there? And I come up with more of a figure of 5 or something in my head. You know, that's I'm for a farm, and we want residential. I know there's the commercial aspect or the making. It just doesn't. It always just doesn't sit right with me when we're fixing things, and the ordinance fixes it just right or a little bit more for them versus maybe stepping back and thinking, what would I do if we started from scratch with this? And so that's just my opinion. I could maybe hear otherwise. You know, I think Rob says that in his mind it could be more, but.
No, I don't want more, I just think 7's fine.
Well, and I would say for sure I don't want to go more than 6 because that's what's there. 7 would give them another one that hasn't been built. So just my general feel would be kind of in the 5 range, that's just my gut feel of what I would feel would be appropriate for a place.
Okay, as far as my feelings on it, I appreciate very much Wadley Farms and the beautiful facility that it has become. I do have a couple of questions, though, when the gardeners were up here. They were talking about the lighting in the parking lot, and you answered that the lighting is shielded, and it is at a low wattage, is that right?
Well, I'm not sure what shielded means, but
Well, I mean, just so that it isn't, it isn't causing problems for neighbors. You said it is at I can't remember what you called it.
they're soft,
Right.
like 110 LEDs, and
Right.
like I say, they're turned off usually at 10
They're
when we have
turned
an
off by
event. It's not
10.
24/7.
Aren't they lower than the top of the walls?
Well, I'm not sure, you know,
I mean,
because we're on such a
your
slope.
elevation's down, so
Yes.
if you drew a line, they're below the top of the walls on the east.
I probably, yeah, oh, very definitely so, yeah.
We have closed the public hearing, but let me just, did you have one specific question?
Just one thing I was gonna say, the main light problem is, I mean, those aren't they're there, but they do go off, but there are lights on the corner of the chateau that are on all night long, that are brighter than the street lights that shine. I mean, I can walk into my kitchen in the middle of the night and it's like daytime. I don't know what the brightness of those are, but it is,
Okay.
those are very bright on the
Okay.
corner of the chateau.
That's one thing I did forget to ask is are there lights on the buildings themselves that are causing problems? And those probably should be or could be shielded down.
Yeah,
So-
I think
one
so.
of my
There's one light,
concerns.
it's just a Home Depot bought light that's action motivated.
No, it stays on all night. It doesn't.
Well, I
Okay.
understand it has a
Okay.
switch
Thank
that's kind
you
of
for your
overridden.
comment.
But
Go ahead.
that's probably, what, about 500 feet from your room, and it's your typical light. So we can put a smaller wattage in there. That's the first I've heard
What
that
about
that's a
shielding?
problem.
What about shielding, so
Yeah, we
they
could
can't
shield
if they can't visibly see the light,
Yeah, that's easy.
the bulb, they can see the light casting downward, but if you could shield it so that they can't, so it doesn't shine into their property.
Yeah, that's an easy fix.
Yeah.
Correction,
Okay, excuse me.
property length is 300 feet.
Okay, we have closed the public hearing. We're just asking some specific questions. Another one, question, and just listening to the gardeners also, is the condition of the wall between them and that building. can that be repaired so that it looks nicer?
Yeah, I think so. I think you could come look at that, and also
Okay.
you can, I have pictures of what it is that we saw from the gardeners on our side before the wall was put up, and it wasn't aesthetically pleasing. And I think the sheds are supposed to be not right on the property line. I think they're supposed to have a 5-foot setback too, and so if someone were to come look at that, they could independently review what she's complained about on the walls themselves. I personally don't think they're that bad, but the cracks can be repaired. But I'd also like them to make a statement as to how close they are to property line, because I think that they're supposed to be back 5 feet.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that would be possible to possibly make that wall look nicer for them and possibly make the lights look so they're shielded.
Yeah,
on
and it
that
may be
building.
helpful for Mike Florence or an independent person to evaluate, because sometimes what it is that
Okay.
is acceptable to me may not be acceptable to
Okay.
you. You know,
Yeah,
sort
and
of thing.
staff could look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that absolutely.
Is there something I mean, the code requires that this 7-foot wall be there to divide commercial from residential. Is there anything in the code that goes on, and talks about maintaining it? Or, I mean, let's say they put up a concrete wall and 30 years from now it falls over, who is responsible? Does the code address maintenance?
It doesn't, I'd have to look over it again, but if you're required to have the wall, you're always required to have it. And so if it falls in disrepair, you do need to fix it. Yep.
Okay. One of my other questions is, as far as Main Street going through, I know that's part of the master plan. I'm not necessarily feeling like that does need to go through at this time. I kind of feel the same way as some of these others. If that use was changed, from the commercial farm use, then maybe at that time. But I am concerned that with the parking for the Red Barn being in the right-of-way at that master plan, that if that did go through, that parking lot would have to be relocated at the owner's expense. Am I understanding that right, Mike?
That was a condition we made if you want to adopt that condition.
Right. So that's a concern, is having that parking being in the right-of-way. But I don't know what your comments are on that.
No, I'm in agreement that if Maine and when it goes through, that, we've made contingency, we've drawn it up, and then the parking would go on the south side of the Red Barn. And then when encroach upon the 40% agricultural land that still is needed, we have redundancy to allow for that.
Okay. But you wouldn't want to put the parking there at this time so that wouldn't have to be moved?
No, it's pasture.
Okay,
Yeah, it's open space, it's green,
okay.
yeah.
I need to walk back there again. I've been back there a lot, but, and I guess my feelings with the use changing of the shop is that even though it is next to the gardeners with a 1-acre lot, that does give some good distance. And if there was a home there, that could be up to 35 feet also. Let's see. On the streets where the emergency access for the temporary turnarounds, can those be, I know some of those, at least one of those is in disrepair. There's no asphalt there or anything anymore from what you said. Could those be repaired so those temporary turnarounds could still be usable? I don't know that.
Yeah, I mean, yes, they can be repaired. We'll have to look and see what those dimensions were on the subdivision plat. But
Okay.
I think the one thing that's unique about those temporary turnarounds too, in any cul-de-sac anywhere, we go and build a cul-de-sac so the fire department can turn around in them, but then we don't make them no parking, and so the fire department can't turn around in them anyway. So so I mean, it's.
Okay, and one of the things we need to look at as a commission is whether to allow the 6 or 7 bed and breakfast. really don't have a problem with going to the 7, even if that meant at some point one additional could be constructed. So those are my comments. Other than that, I think it's a beautiful, beautiful development and such an asset to our city.
Yeah, I think it's gorgeous. The Red Barn gets me excited to bring my kids there, you know?
Yeah,
So
it does.
I thought you are gonna need some parking, because I think people will really like it. I agree also with Main Street. This is just the beginning, like you were saying, a lot of this is organic. You're not sure how it's gonna be yet. And so I think that's great I think we wait on that. I also wanted to ask about these lots. It looks like the lot you want the vineyard on is quite a bit smaller than the other one, which I would think is probably part of your reasoning for that, right? To put the vineyard there?
No, the reasoning is when I built the castle, I built it over my shop, and I'm sorry that I didn't have my crystal ball to, I would have saved a whole lot of money and hassle and neighbor problems. But I always regretted the fact, because when I built the castle, the ordinance then said I only had to have a 10-foot setback from the fence. And I didn't own that property that was adjoining to me. And it too was an extremely terrible repair. There were wrecked cars back there. It was junk. There was a semi-trailer. It was very unaesthetically pleasing for this nice castle to have 10 feet over it, that kind of a debris,
Right.
and an uncared lot. And so over time, with the help of Brett Frampton, we were able to purchase that house. And Brett bought the house, and I bought that 1/3 acre. And the idea was then to expand the vineyards into there, so it's not so compressed against on the east side of the castle, and it's more feeling of openness.
Yeah.
That's why we're putting it there.
Okay, I like it. I think it'll be beautiful. And I've seen a lot of shops in my day that didn't look as beautiful as these shops. So-
Hard to say it's a shop. Huh?
Right?
Okay, before I make a comment, I need to make it clear who, where I live, I actually am a neighbor of Allen's, so that's gonna, if that plays into it in your mind, I'm up on 400, but my property backs to, it abuts a property that Allen owns, and then it also abuts his son's home, Jared, who it then butts straight to the property. So as a result of that, when I first moved in, I moved in from a concrete jungle, from a state that I'm just gonna remain nameless because I don't want you to crucify me. I'm a political refugee from that state. So I came here trying to avoid that concrete jungle. And so when we first got here and we saw what Alan had done, that was the first place we went. We got a bottle of his grape juice, and that's what we cracked open when we closed escrow on our retirement home in Lindon. And then several years later, when we moved in, we got another bottle. And so I have this fondness for Alan's place, and being as close as I am to him, I have had an opportunity to wander through the Red Barn and see the timbers and see everything that's going on, and listen to him talk about his vision. And his vision is why I left the concrete jungle. This is where I want to be, And so, so I have to let you know in advance. That's sort of where my position I come from. I call Alan a great neighbor. I wouldn't call him we're wonderful friends because he's never taken me out to dinner. But but we're just good friends. And I enjoy spending time talking with his son Jared behind me. And so there just seemed to be a very stalwart family that I just, I have great respect for. So as far as the issues, I think we've covered most of the issues fairly well regarding the 2 parcels. I like those 2 parcels adjoining. That makes sense. Putting the walls makes sense. I think at a later date, we can work with the gardeners when it comes time, because right now that's not on the plan. That's not what we're here talking about, is what kind of building goes on that lot. But when that time comes, then we can have that discussion and see what we can do to mitigate any concerns you may have. Unfortunately, that's not.
Just one item on that. If it is truly a shop, like an agricultural accessory building, it'll be approved by staff.
Okay.
On that. So so I just want to make sure
Okay.
that's clear.
Okay, that's true. So, but staff is aware of the concerns of the gardeners and,
Right, now the ordinance does allow it to go to 35 feet, so we're talking about possibly 1 story, but I just want to make it clear the ordinance does have a height allowance in that.
And I don't think staff has I mean, if it meets code, they have to approve it, so.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things, being on the planning commission, as I've been on the planning commission now going on close to 5 years, that's one thing I find difficult about being on the planning commission, is sometimes even though we don't like anything, our job isn't to pick and choose what we like. Our job is to determine whether it meets the code. And we're sort of the filter for city council. So we can't say, ooh, it fits the code, but I don't like it, so we're gonna say no. And sometimes people have a feeling that we have this ability to stop some of the development that's going in. But we don't if it actually complies. So that's sort of our job. We just sort of vet that. So with that being said, I think everything works great. Being a retired police officer who's written laws, the devil's in the details. So this is for the city attorney over there. So in 17-24, it states, in the event the land contained within the development is traversed by a proposed major street shown on the master plan, such development shall be designed and it shall be dedicated. The previous page in our staff report indicates that Main Street is a 66-foot wide minor collector. Devil's in the details. I don't know if that really applies. I mean, I don't know how you're interpreting that.
We looked at those details, but you have to go back and look at, there's a definition of major road, and it includes various, and I can't cite it to you right now.
Correct. I understand. I was just pointing out, I was just gonna point that out, because I too am a believer that this holding zone shall remain there until before the land is then turns back in conformance with the general plan. It's interesting that we now look at it now as a commercial property, but I guarantee when it turns back, when this property no longer becomes a viable farm, it's not gonna turn back to a commercial use. We're not gonna put a mall there. It's gonna convert back to a residential use, and then.
It has to.
Yeah, and so then at that.
R120 zone.
Right, and so then at that point, that street should go through. I was on record on the Norton properties with pushing, I believe strongly that what road is it down?
570.
570, that 570 go through. The residents didn't want that cul-de-sac to go through. However, that's totally different than this, in my opinion, because that was an access issue. It provided access for those people to access to the schools, and not having to go out on State Street. I just don't see the benefit of pushing this street through other than to say, okay, now we comply with the master plan. I mean, there really wasn't many people here tonight from, what are those 2 streets? It's, gotta put on my spectacles here. 450 and 480. I guarantee you, none of them are gonna want this street to go through as well. So, what's the benefit?
You're saying true.
What's the benefit? I mean, and if this was a collector that we wanted to push through because there's a large development up there, a large area that's still to be developed, that we know then it's gonna provide access. But this doesn't provide an overall great access. Not to mention the fact that I as a traffic officer for many, many, many years, I can tell you that any roadway that's punched through like that does not have residences on it or anything like that, it just becomes a freeway. No one's gonna live on that section, and that's just a connector. And the only person who's gonna be affected by that is Allen. As that traffic volume is racing through there, right next to the barn, where we want to have our children going over and having lunch. So I strongly support that triggers once Allen says this is no longer viable, this is going back to an R120, Main Street must go through, we must do those connectors. And so that's where I sit. And Alan, I do have guests stay with me now, and I'm gonna bring them over to look at your property again. All my visitors come over, I take them over. It's just you walk in and it's just a piece of heaven.
You mean they don't need to stay with you?
What?
Okay,
They don't need
Jared,
to stay with you. They
do
can
you
stay
have
there.
additional concerns or comments, or?
I'll be brief. I mean, I don't have a familiarity with your family. I mean, you've been before us maybe once or twice, and in fact, I enjoyed your presentation because I really didn't know how extensive and what kind of things are really going on at your property. So I don't really have any incentive to sort of be agreeable to any of this for any personal motivation. I see the family being, at least Alan, being a very good steward of this property, and that stewardship I think he holds really sacred. And in order for him to transmit that sort of passion to his kids, that the property has to be profitable, it has to be self-sustaining. Otherwise, they're gonna be incentivized to just divide it up and sell it. And who could blame him for doing that? I mean, you just can't blame him for doing that. So I don't think he's trying to do these things from a position of greed or trying to make money. He seems like a very successful individual. I don't think this is a money play. I think this is him trying to set this up so that it can continue after he dies. So I guess I'm getting on a soapbox there, but I just don't see it coming from a position of greed. Even some of the things that may have occurred where he put the cart before the horse, as it's been said, I don't think is something that was being done dishonestly in any way. As far as the bed and breakfast Airbnb units, sounds fun, brings people in, love it. I think it is wise to put a cap on it like we've done. Bringing the 2 parcels into the property, assembling those with the rest of the property, I have no problem with that. What else? There's some other things there, but basically, I don't want to be redundant, but those are some thoughts there.
Okay. Go ahead.
Well, Jared, your comments are appreciated and well taken. You know, having seen patients, 43 years, 40 a day, you get a pretty good sense of people. And 2 things I've learned, and that's number 1, everybody's got a deal. And you can always tell where they're going to stand on an issue by where they sit. And it sounds strange, but I have set this up so that it can go on into perpetuity. I've been blessed with a good job. I don't have to sell it. We do have, I think, a sacred kind of responsibility to the earth. We do not know what the future holds. We do know that our supply chains for our food are very tenuous, and that I think it's extremely important that we preserve this. It's in my bones. We have set this up with our trust so that it can go on into perpetuity, and so that's why we have Tanner and our other children here. And so it sounds altruistic and even unbelievable that I don't have a deal, and I'm not trying to flip something to, earn a buck, but that's not the case. My motives are, pure and not disingenuous. They may be ignorant, if Rob's still here, I do, but I make mistakes, and so do we all, but mistakes aren't roadblocks, they're road signs, and you move on, sort of thing. Thank you.
Okay, I think, we appreciate those comments, and appreciate the comments of all of you. I think one of the things that we need to decide before we go ahead with motions is whether we want to allow 6 or the 7 bed and breakfast units. What are your thoughts?
I have no problem with the 7, considering how many acres it is. I mean,
Okay.
I mean, the day this goes away, we're gonna have a whole lot more than that in that 18 acres. So I have no problem with that, and I don't think people coming in and spending the night in that facility is what's making all the noise. And so I can't see that giving them a little bit of flexibility, I think is great, and I think it also gives anybody in the future who this may apply to a little bit of flexibility as well.
Question of staff, is this something we can make a motion on? Do we need to make a motion and vote on each item or one?
We do.
Yeah, there's several motions.
Okay.
We need to do all of them. And staff, as far as things like repairs of the wall or, additional light shielding off on the building, that kind of thing, that's something that staff can just manage, right? Okay. Then are we ready for motions on these items?
Well,
What else
I
do we
think
need
Brian
to?
and I need some direction, a little bit on the Main Street. I know, overwhelmingly, it sounds like let's wait on that, but we need to look at some type of agreement so that we're following our own ordinance. I mean, we also need to look at, 450 and 480. What do we do in the meantime, with that? Does it, so that there is proper public safety access and, to those streets.
So if those are repaired, so that, with, the asphalt and the turnaround, so it's appropriate?
Is that the city's responsibility to repair those? I mean, is it?
Well,
I mean,
480, is
I
that a
don't
private
know.
road?
It's not, they're both public streets. The private streets,
Okay.
let me pull that up. Let me go back to my presentation. Yeah, so the private streets are the
Yeah,
north-south
side, the
streets
side.
here.
Okay.
480 and 450 are both public.
Does anybody, well, none of you were here probably when that went in, but was the developer responsible to put the turnarounds at the ends
They
of
were.
those?
Mm-hmm.
And is it the opinion that they do not service now? Don't they work?
No, well, there's.
Garbage trucks are turning around in there now?
I'm sure they work, but, for 480, for example, doesn't have any asphalt at the end. It's just straight. I mean, there's no turnaround asphalt.
Mm-hmm.
It's just,
That was my question, if that could be repaired,
Well, why,
put in.
yeah, okay.
Isn't there a hammerhead on that one?
there's not. So 40th North is a private street, so, I mean, technically,
Oh, I see.
the city, yeah, you could back up, but that's a private street.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're just looking for
Well,
some
I think
direction on
staff,
this.
I think I would recommend that staff look into that. I mean, the developers, I don't know, on the condos, the developer's gone.
Mhm.
So I don't know,
Mike, I think that if the decision is we're not going to make Main Street go in at this time, I think it's probably the city's responsibility to look at that, because if they denied and said, hey, you either put it in or don't, and Alan wouldn't have to put it in if he decided not to do the development, the city would be responsible to do that.
exactly.
And so I think that if the commission's recommendation is that we come up with an agreement that we push this down and have an agreement in place on what will trigger it, moving stuff out, and you can direct us to sit down with Alan and come up with an agreement that's agreeable to everybody on that. But I think if that's the route we go, I think that we're still it's kind of the same condition we were in before the application. So I think that that's
Well,
the city's responsibility.
And the other
to work
thing
out
is, Alan wouldn't be responsible to develop the whole road, right? The city would have to do half and he would have to do half.
Yeah, there's portions the city would do. We would help with asphalt.
I mean, they'd have to
There's-
put the asphalt, the curb and gutter all the way down for 2 blocks, for 4 blocks. Right? Do we have the money to do that?
Well, if it's a typical development, the city, if it, say residential came in, or, a commercial development that we've done, that developer's on the hook. Now, there's portions of this that's, city has frontage, we would be required to put that in. The development manual requires the city to participate in a portion of the asphalt as well. And so, yeah, we would have some skin in the game on
Yeah,
that.
and there's big grade difference from those homes to Alan's property, so that would have to be addressed, and that's not gonna be cheap. I don't know, I suggest we have staff get with Alan and come up with an agreement like it was suggested, that it be postponed, and like it's been said, all he has to do is just say, okay, I'm not gonna develop this, and he doesn't have to put it through, so.
Well, and also, we are just making a recommendation to the city council, and they are the ones that would have to determine how that could be funded.
Yeah, so I think the easy, cleanest trigger is if and when it reverts back to an R120, then it has to go, then the
Or more
developer.
dense. It probably will not be an R120.
Yeah, it won't be an R120, yeah, the state will probably mandate it be 60 homes per acre by then.
We hope not.
You know.
We hope it stays R120. Okay.
Excuse me, but I heard you, Brian, kind of develop a straw man suggesting that we go to the city council with the understanding that this is a holding zone and that what would trigger the development of Main Street would be when Wadley Farms develops.
You know,
Yeah.
it comes out of the commercial farms.
When it,
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
when
what I
it
heard you say.
changes to a different zone.
But to address that, I really do think it would be incumbent upon the city to have just an agreement so that future councils, future property owners can't come in and say, hey, this should have been put on Allen when he did this. And we'll say, we've addressed it, here's the agreement, it's incumbent on Allen if he decides to take it out or any future property owner. So.
Does that need to go in this motion for the Red Barn?
I would ask that we put that motion.
Well, let's make it a condition.
With Allen to record.
Which one of these would that condition go in?
The red,
Where would that go where,
oh, yeah.
With the red barn.
with the
barn.
red barn?
Okay.
And so,
I'm ready to make a motion.
okay,
So
so
we've
do you
got-
know the words we need to
Well,
use on
we'll
Well,
that?
try
we've
as
got,
you go.
we've got, what, 1, 2, 3, 5 different motions.
Right.
So we'll,
Okay,
no, they're up here on the screen as well, so.
Okay.
so
So-
that condition then is, tell me that condition one more time.
Well, it's gonna go with the red barn.
Yeah, and what do you,
But
okay, I'll
let's
see
start
what
with
you
the
say.
bed and breakfast.
Okay,
We gotta start with the
you've got to start with the
ordinance amendment.
ordinance.
And can I just ask a few more questions on that real quick? Can you remind me, what is the acreage you used to come up with the 7?
1 per 4.
One,
You're allowed one,
For 4 acres.
yeah, you're allowed 1 bed and breakfast unit per 4 acres.
per 4 acres, okay.
So he's got 18, and so that
That's
would allow.
total acreage, not agriculture acreage or whatever.
I
That's
did
just
off the total
total
development
acreage
acreage,
of the
yeah.
property, okay, 1 to 4. That's where
Okay.
you came up with the 7, okay.
That's where it came up with the 4 bed and breakfast units.
The others are,
And then the
So the
ordinance,
7 is independent of that.
7 is.
yes.
7 is just a number you just,
That'd be the 4 bed and breakfast units, the single family home, the accessory apartment,
and then,
and the,
and the second
Second.
single-family
Single-family
residence.
residence.
Right, on that.
and that would give them the option of doing 1 additional. If we did 7, right?
And what would be the requirement, if you wanted to do that 7th? Would he need to come back again for an
Yeah.
approval?
because the conditional use permit, I tied it to 3.
Okay, so the conditional use, so if he was gonna build a 4th one, and it was then something we couldn't mitigate, we could then not give him the conditional use
So
permit
if-
at
yeah,
that
so
time,
if
right?
he-
I mean, if it was a noise problem or whatever, it's something we figured we couldn't mitigate at the problem. But, I mean, so we could we'd have the opportunity to address any problems with the future bed and breakfast at that time. It would have to come back before this body.
That's correct.
Okay. And then, Rob, I was just gonna remind you on the motion, the conditional use for the bed and breakfast, we do need it to add that condition that there is a designation of a central eating place.
That's in the ordinance, so I feel, but that it's designated, and you can add that as a condition, or we can take care of that
If
as
it's
staff.
designated, let's don't,
It's
Okay.
designated, clean, leave the
Okay.
motion clean.
Okay, you had just said that we needed to add that
I
as a
just
condition.
asked about that,
Okay,
because it's a conditional use. I would just put it in there but that's fine.
okay. Go ahead,
Okay,
Rob.
So I move to recommend approval to the city council of ordinance 2023-05-0 as presented to us here tonight.
I'll
Okay.
second that motion.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I haven't voted yet. Give me a second. I'm sorry,
Okay.
struggling with the number, but I'll vote aye. I think that the math is okay, as long as it has to come back to us, so.
That's an accountant.
Right.
Then the next part of the motion is the
okay.
conditional use bed and breakfast.
Okay,
I move to recommend approval to the city council of the applicant's request for a conditional use permit for bed and breakfast retreat located at 35 East, 400 North, with the following conditions. The proposed bed and breakfast retreat is approved for 3 bed and breakfast units. Any outstanding building code requirements, changes of use for caretaker unit to bed and breakfast units will be addressed with a Lindon City building official and building permits obtained. All transient room taxes will be paid to the state of Utah for the bed and breakfast use, and all items of the staff report.
I'll second that.
okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the voting is unanimous.
And then I move to recommend approval of the applicant's request for a conditional use permit and site plan for an additional commercial use event building located at 35 East and 400 North with the following conditions listed below. I won't go into those because they have been read, I think, tonight.
I don't know if they.
We don't need to add anything there, do we?
We didn't talk about the food processing, but that, so.
But
does that
that's
need to
in
be-
the-
Does that need to be read in, or are we good?
I just said in the presentation that he's looking at doing like, food production, the grape juice, sorry, it's late. The grape juice production there, so the ordinance does allow as a conditional use, you can have up to 2,000 square feet.
I was just wondering if that condition needs to be read into the record, because we haven't read that about, that he needs all the permits, but as long as we're good with the motion, I'm fine.
Okay.
Okay,
I move to recommend approval. Oh, we didn't vote on that.
Need to vote, yeah.
okay,
I second.
okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the voting is unanimous.
I
Okay,
move to recommend approval to the city council of the applicant's request for a conditional use permit and site plan for a retail building. Did I do that one?
No, this is
no,
No, okay. With the following conditions listed below, 1 through 4.
I'll second that motion.
This one, this is the Red Barn,
This is the red
that's
barn.
correct.
so don't we need to
Oh,
add
yeah, we need to add.
a condition?
This is where we add the condition of the Main Street agreement between staff and Mr. College that will trigger Main Street going through if and when the farm zone is abandoned.
is that wording okay? That's perfect. Okay, we have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay, motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
And then the last one is,
Voting's unanimous.
okay. I move to recommend approval to the City Council of Ordinance 2023-06-0 to amend the Lindon City zoning map from single-family residential R120 to commercial farm for parcels, and they're listed below, 0359 and 0345, the 2 parcels on the east, with the following conditions. The applicant will combine the 2 parcels with overall acreage of the Wadley Farm development, a 7-foot masonry, a minimum 7-foot masonry or concrete fence be installed to screen the property parcel 0359 from the adjoining single-family R120 zone properties and all items of the staff report.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the voting is unanimous. I think, though, because some of the commission is not as, I'm quite familiar with your property, a lot of the commission are not. I think just because of all the things we've done, that we ought to be able to have a tour of your property. I've got you into that more than once.
Problem is, you
haven't
get
I?
you over there, you go to work.
Yeah. No, I mentioned this to Hugh too, because, not Hugh, what am I saying, Mike too, that I I think it would be good for us to be very familiar with the property and where the different uses are.
I think too, that would be extremely helpful.
And if you did that between now and the time city council took it up, then that would give them the benefit as well.
I think that's an excellent idea, yes.
When will this go to city council?
There's some budget hearings coming up, so
2 meetings.
excuse me. I don't know, I'm getting choked up about this, so.
Your daughter's getting married, right?
Yeah, I don't know if it's June 5th meeting or that first meeting or the second meeting in June, so.
So we do have a little bit of time.
Well, yeah, I mean, you guys have made your recommendation, that we'll have to just see when the council would be available.
Okay. Well, we've made those motions and those approvals, and appreciate you very much. Appreciate
your staff.
Wadley Farms very much, and what
Thank you.
you've made that.
It's, this, next year will be 150th anniversary, and we are hoping that we can be very much a part of that celebration. Yeah. Unfortunately, my wife and I won't be here. We'll
We've
be
heard your,
Papua New Guinea.
that's what we've heard.
We'll be out of your hair for 2 years, so.
It's a 2-year mission, huh?
Yeah, I don't know what that's all about. The only thing is, I think they're making me cram for the finals.
Are you
It's hard to find a physician.
Are you medical? Are you a medical?
Yes.
over
And then
that
Chris will
area?
be member support. But it's they have 2 stakes. Papua New Guinea is this 1/3 the size of California. They have 8 million people. 80% live rural, and I mean rural. They don't allow sister missionaries there, and the elders can't go out proselyting at night. So you might not see me again.
Did you request that area, or was that
Well,
just?
that was
something
one of our
happened?
requests, but I knew something was up when the brethren called and said, from the missionary department, would you really be interested in going to Papua New Guinea? I said, oh, sounds like a good place to go. Yeah.
Oh, boy, huh?
It would be fun and challenging.
I think it would be good for us to actually tour that facility, or
I'd love that.
not facility, the farm.
I'd like that very much.
Yeah, just so we, especially before it possibly before it goes to city council, just so we're really sure on our recommendations that we've made.
I think that's an excellent idea, and that's one of the reasons why we've tried to do all of these housekeeping, and Mike's been most helpful to make certain things are tucked away for the kids, because it is very convoluted. It is complicated, and so again, we appreciate all that you've done and helped us with over the years. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I don't know why you do what you do.
Yeah.
I'm glad you do it.
Well, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for being here with us and your presentation. And thank you to all you residents and those interested for being here.
We get rich.
He looks thrilled.
Yeah.
I know why you do it, because you love Lindon, right? You love Lindon. It's the money, it's the limousine.
You got me into this.
Right?
Thank you, thank you.
Complaints because we give each other X amount of dollars every month for just Matt.
I guess we need to wait for just a minute, huh?
My extra $92 comes in. Now it's gonna be.
Huh?
I'm more than her. She's gonna be
Yeah.
upset about that.
Yeah, there were just a couple of things I was
don't
just gonna
spend it.
mention
She
real
spends
quick.
all hers on crafts and all the stuff that's designed to go on. And I don't need anything.
You're like, what am I gonna?
It builds up, and once in a while I splurge, you know?
It's funny. Yeah, it doesn't even cover a gym membership.
What?
Barely covers a gym membership.
We're gonna go ahead and complete our planning commission meeting. If you could take your conversations.
Go outside, Jared.
Out in the hall. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, so we can go ahead and finish up.
They're welcome
or you can stay and listen if you want, but we just, as far as the planning commission reports, the only thing that I have is that I think it would be interesting for Mike to let the commission know what the council's decision, and I listened to that online on the landscaping ordinance that we spent a lot of time on and had the Central Utah representative here.
Yeah, they passed that at the last city council meeting. I had went through the ordinance again and with Adam, and we looked at it and kind of, we took the irrigation part out. And then the council had us put it back in, but it made it more general, just saying you have to have irrigation to the landscaping. So we made that a lot more general on that, but they passed that requirement.
Yeah, and the part that I wondered if they would pass on the 1 year with the 6-month extension, they did pass that, and maybe Mike, you can tell them what the discussion on that was.
I'm trying to, yeah.
Well, it was just that.
I mean, of course, you know, they want us to try and work with people as much as
Right.
possible, and, you know, if they're working on their landscaping, you know, and making progress, then, you know, be reasonable, and so.
There was
Right.
a bunch of discussion about maybe extending that out because they didn't want us to come down with a heavy hand. But we explained to them that the way our ordinances work, they're drafted to take away that heavy hand, except for the ultimate, you know, last resort. So.
Right, and we sure appreciate you being here with us tonight too, Brian.
I enjoy being with you guys.
So, the only other thing, just quickly, you hopefully all noticed the swimming passes are available, and that's one of those things I look forward to. Also, a reminder of the Memorial Day program coming up next Monday, and that's always a very nice event.
Oh, that's in the cemetery?
Yeah, and I don't have anything else. Mike, do you?
I don't. Sorry, I do have one item. I got the link right before planning commission meeting for our updated general plan, so I'm going to go downstairs and email that out to you tonight.
Okay.
The plan is to have a public hearing on that on June 13th. I think that's the right date, so.
It's a separate
Okay.
meeting.
No,
No, that's
same.
our planning commission
Yeah.
night. Okay. Okay, do we have a motion to, well, do any of the rest of you have anything you'd like to bring up?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
I just really am still struggling with the ideas of fixing things after they happen. So I wish, I don't know if that can be addressed anywhere, or, you know, how to get these things. It just seems like this has been a chronic problem with, you know, Wadley Farms, and it's beautiful. But, you know, I don't know if there's any way to
I don't think we have
encourage
it as
that.
much with Wadley Farms as we've had it with other people. I mean, how many times lately have we had people bring things in that, I mean, the snake guy.
Right, well,
Dance studio.
right, but we didn't then make an ordinance for the snake guy or whatever. It's just something that personally I struggle with, even like with the Norton property, that we then went back and said Norton, you know, the low book counts after the fact and stuff, and those are just things that I struggle with.
Well, I
So-
think we got ourselves in trouble on those as well. You know, we came up with, we crafted an ordinance, said, okay, this is a good ordinance, but then we realized the next project was an orange, not an apple.
Yeah, so.
You know, so it was sort of,
I don't know what we can do.
And I'm
but
not
that's-
defending Steve on this situation too, but there's also sort of, you gotta prove the concept, and I don't know how long they've been operating those, maybe it's been a couple of years or whatever.
Couple
but-
years, yeah.
But, you know, those take a lot of investment to set up, and,
Well, and that's why we gave notice too. I mean, we told them they were illegal, and they had to get that approved by you, so.
And I
so-
really appreciate that they've done that and stuff. I'm just saying that's
I
one thing.
think it's good that they're in compliance,
That's
but
one
I'm
thing
not.
that I always struggle with, that we give them what they need versus you know, and I came around and I can see the value of the numbers in this one, and I'm fine with it, but, you know, when the numbers,
Point well taken.
When the numbers
I
match what
totally
they-
agree with you. Thank you for,
And that's one
thank
of
you
the-
for keeping us on the straight and narrow and pointing us in that direction, because I agree with you all the time. You're always very thoughtful on your
Right.
analysis, so thank you.
Well, and that's one of the reasons I even addressed that with Allen College is, you know, why are you coming in now rather than when you put those in?
yeah, so, and I appreciate what staff does to make it work, and that's, we'll see what, we'll see what the city council decides, whether they're as lenient as we are, right?
Yeah.
But that won't come before city council, not this next meeting, but the following
I
meeting?
don't know yet.
Okay.
I imagine it will be the next one, too. I don't know that we'll have room to put this on.
They've probably got a 2 or 3 hour budget meeting.
Right.
Plus
Right, that's what I mean.
a
probably
3
two
hour
meetings from-
Watley Farms meeting,
Yeah, probably 2 meetings from now.
probably.
Yeah, okay.
And plus, we need to look, I'd like to, I don't know, Brian, if I'm saying this out of turn, but if we're going to have an agreement, the council
like to
probably
have it.
needs to review that too, so.
We would like to
Right.
get that in place.
Right.
Yep.
I appreciate you working with me on that. I just feel so much better about that. There's a lot of times when we go back and we go, what were they doing? Why did
Right.
they do that?
Right,
And having an agreement recorded against the property just really helps a lot.
right.
And don't take, I wasn't trying to point out the flaws, just if it was something that you might be able to hang your hat on, you go, oh, that's something we can hang we can hang our hat on that little thing for 30 seconds. You know?
We did discuss that, and that's something we probably need to clean up a little bit too, because there are different sections of where major road means one thing and then another place it means another.
A lot of times it depends on whether you get funding for that road for maintenance or not, and
Right.
on the maps and everything, so yeah.
Okay. Well, do we have a motion to, are you finished? Okay.
I made the motion, I motion
Okay,
that we adjourn.
Let's, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Well, thank you to all of you. I appreciate your knowledge and your input, and